Right, I'll just wait till 2 more people are seated. Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of Burnside Council. Please stand for the acknowledgements. We acknowledge that the land that we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important to the Kaurna people today. We also pay respect to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people visiting and attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia. On behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to those who gave their lives for this country and its people. Please remain standing for the opening prayer. We pray for understanding and guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all those who reside, study, work and visit the City of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Please be seated. I welcome members in the gallery and ask them to observe in respectful silence as the Chamber deliberates on matters that relate to the City of Burnside. Should there be a fire or any other emergency, the alarm will sound and you are asked to follow directions of Council staff. I need to remind that Council meetings are live streamed through the City of Burnside website and a copy of tonight's agenda is available by downloading from the website, and there also are some available on the seats in the gallery. I remind elected members of the importance of using their microphones appropriately so that those at home can hear clearly. We have a particularly long agenda tonight, so I just ask all to gauge the sense of the meeting and use time effectively. Provide support sparingly if it appears there is little or no opposition. Apologies, I'm not aware of any. Leave of absence, Councillor Cornish, and we do have a request for leave of absence from Councillor Turnbull. So I would like a motion. Councillor Davis, you're moving that motion, and Councillor Davey, you're seconding it. Those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously, I think. Right. Confirmation of the minutes. I need a recommendation, a motion for the recommendation of accepting the minutes, please. Councillor Carbone, seconded Councillor Piggott. All those in favour? Against? Carried. There are no deputations. There are no petitions. Now, for public question time, I'm going to ask our CEO to reply before we invite the questions from the gallery in relation to questions that were asked at the last meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. In relation to the previous council meeting, there were a number of questions asked by the public which were taken on notice, and I will read the questions out and provide the administration's response to those questions. First, we had Mr. Peter Hartley of Glen Osmond asking a question about workers' compensation, and the first question was, can the administration please explain why such deterioration was not brought to the attention of council when budgetary matters were being discussed at that time? In response, claim costs for the 2014-15 financial year were $150,004, not the alleged quote of $15,004, compared to the 2016-17 financial year, which was $210,831. Workers' compensation contributions are reported within the City of Burnside financial statements, and any material variances are reported upon in quarterly updates to Council. Comparisons across multiple previous years are not included in the quarterly reports. However, comparisons are made to that year's budgeted amount for scheme contributions. The second question was, secondly, can you advise the reasons for the huge spike in workers' compensation costs and claims in 2016-2017? The 2016-17 financial year had 20 claims compared to the annual average of 10. Various factors identified through incident investigation processes have been recorded. Muscle, tendon, ligament or joint injuries related to manual handling activities was identified as one of the more significant contributing factors, though no systemic cause was identified for these. It's important to note that the number of claims is only one of several factors involved in Council's contribution costs, with key factors being council wages, special distribution funds, which are derived from the overall scheme performance, and council's performance bonus. Council's increase in contributions between 2014-15 and 2016-17 can be attributed to the overall increase in wages in line with enterprise bargaining agreements, a reduction in the overall 2016-17 special distribution funds to council, as well as a reduction to council's performance bonus. The third question, thirdly, what strategies did the administration adopt to actively manage and reduce these costs back to a sustainable level? In response, whilst Council is able to eliminate and or reduce the risk of injury to workers through continued active work health and safety management, once an injury occurs, costs are often outside the control of Council. The administration does have a long track record, better than the industry benchmark, which is 9 days versus 16 days, for early return of workers back to full duties. Fourth question. Fourthly, can you provide the number of workers' compensation claims and costs for 2017-18 financial year and the respective figures for the 2018-19 financial year to date? The claims for 2017-18, there were 10 at a cost of $56,959, and the year to date for 2018-19 financial year, there are 6 claims at a cost of $9,465. The fifth question. Finally, having regard for the upward pressure on contributions, what impact did the massive blowout have on future Burnside Council premiums to the LGA scheme? In response, the contribution Council pays for its workers' compensation is made up of a number of factors, not solely claims, number or costs. 50% of the rebate or contribution costs come from claims performance, measured over a 48-month trading window, and 50% come from WHS Return to Work Annual Action Plan audit results. Further, through Council's membership of the scheme, it is able to ensure, irrespective of yearly variances, a contribution rate below that which it would be offered by alternate providers. The sector-wide average net rate is typically around 2.78% of total wages declared to the scheme. The next question that the administration took on notice was from Mr. Jim Jacobson of Fruitville and related to legal matters undertaken by members of the staff and elected members. First question, can you please advise what were the legal costs incurred by the Burnside Council in pursuing Councillor Lance Bagster unsuccessfully through Safe Work SA? In response, the Council did not unsuccessfully pursue former Councillor Bagster through Safe Work SA. The Council takes its obligations under the Work Health Safety Act of 2012 seriously. This requires that, so far as reasonably practicable, it ensures that the health and safety of employees and other persons attending at the Civic Centre or involved in Council business, including elected members, is not put at risk. In giving effect to its obligation, the Council made a report to Safe Work SA in relation to the bullying, threatening and harassing behaviours of former Councillor Bagster as against Council employees and elected members. After conducting a preliminary investigation, Safe Work SA concluded that it did not have the jurisdiction to deal with these allegations. No legal costs were incurred by the Council in reporting the same to Safe Work SA. The Ombudsman concluded that former Councillor Bagster had committed 12 acts of misconduct in public administration. Most significantly, the Ombudsman concluded that former Councillor Bagster had bullied and harassed his fellow Council officers, including Council staff, creating a risk to health and safety. The Ombudsman observed that the existing statutory framework appeared ill-equipped for dealing with conduct of an elected member of a council that creates a risk to health and safety, and recommended that the state government cause a review of the Local Government Act 1999 and the Work Health and Safety Act 2012 to determine whether either act should be amended. A copy of Investigation Report 2-17/10978 can be found on the Ombudsman's website. Second question, can you please advise the legal costs incurred by the Burnside Council in pursuing Councillor Lance Bagster unsuccessfully through Fair Work Australia? In response, the Council did not unsuccessfully pursue former Councillor Bagster through the Fair Work Commission. In giving effect to its obligations under the Work Health and Safety Act of 2012, and after being advised that Safe Work SA did not have jurisdiction to deal with the matter, the Council made a report to the Fair Work Commission. The Fair Work Commission ruled that it had no jurisdiction to deal with this matter. No legal costs were incurred by the Council in reporting the same. Third question, what is the estimated or actual staff time and costs incurred in mounting these unsuccessful legal actions? In response, the council did not mount unsuccessful legal actions. As former Councillor Baxter engaged in inappropriate and offensive communications with his fellow elected members and council staff over an extended period of time, the estimated administrative costs and time required to manage the same cannot be quantified. However, as noted by the Ombudsman at page 171 in Investigation Report 2017/10978, quote, his conduct has in fact resulted in an enormous waste of public resources. His behaviour has been entirely self-centred and counterproductive to the council's efficient discharge of its functions. His behaviour falls far short of reasonable community expectations. Question 4. What were the total costs incurred by the council in driving Councillor Lance Bagster from this chamber and preventing him from fulfilling his democratically elected role as an elected member of this council? In response, former Councillor Baxter was not driven from the chamber, and nor was he prevented from fulfilling his role as an elected member. Former Councillor Baxter remained an elected member of the council and held this office until he chose to resign in September 2018. As noted by the Ombudsman at page 171 in Investigation Report 2017/10978, quote, Councillor Bagster's position as an elected member of the council is no longer tenable. Even he must surely recognise this. The Ombudsman recommended that the council lay a complaint against former Councillor Bagster in the District Court, seeking that he be disqualified from office and that he be further disqualified from becoming a member of a council for a period not exceeding 5 years, and noted the council's estimated costs in managing and responding to Councillor Bagster's conduct from March 2017 to May 2018. Fifth question. Finally, why did the council use a mediation report by Teresa Hines for a plethora of purposes, including publication on council's website and subsequent legal action, when the law prohibits its use for any other purpose under section 271 of the Local Government Act, which states without any exception, part 6, evidence of anything said or done in an attempt to resolve a matter by mediation, conciliation or neutral evaluation under this section must not be disclosed in subsequent proceedings. It is therefore a very reasonable question to ask, why did this council do so? In response, sections 270 and or 271 of the Local Government Act 1999 were not and are not relevant to the management of former Councillor Bagster's inappropriate and offensive communications with his fellow elected members and council staff over an extended period of time. In giving effect to its obligations under the Work Health and Safety Act of 2012, the council received 2 independent assessment reports prepared by external consultants. Each report found and articulated concerns that the escalating, ongoing, serious and threatening behaviours of former Councillor Bagster constituted bullying and harassment. Accordingly, the council resolved to give effect to its obligations under that Act, which involved interactions with various oversight bodies, including the Fair Work Commission, Safe Work SA, the Minister, the Local Government Association and the courts. As noted by the Ombudsman at pages 171 to 173 of the Investigation Report 2017/10978, the current legislative and statutory framework has limited remedies to adequately address bullying and or harassment by an elected member. The council remains committed to working with the Local Government Association and the government in addressing this serious oversight.
Thank you. Now we have our first.
I have a formal motion. I move that we move to the next item of business.
We have at least two questions that have been already
Given
provided.
I move that way. Given that we've already spent, over almost 15 minutes already, we have a huge agenda. Having those, I don't need to speak to it, but I move that way that we move to the next item of business.
Sorry, your formal motion? Yes, that this motion be put?
No, sorry. Move to the next item.
Oh, that we move, okay.
We move to the next item of business is a formal motion.
Yes.
It doesn't get spoken to, it just gets moved and seconded, then we do it.
If it's voted upon.
Yeah, we just vote on.
Right, so I'm about to ask for voting. I was just checking to see if anyone was allowed to speak on this. Okay, right, so can I have those who are in favour, please? Raise your hands. Those who are against? Motion's lost. We'll have our first question, please. I believe it's the gentleman over in the corner there. Would you mind coming to the seat in the middle and have a seat in one of those chairs? Press the button that says speak in front of you. And what I'll just explain, you have 2 minutes to ask your question. You can preface it with some information, but you have to be within the 2 minutes. Before you raise your question, if you would just identify who you are, what suburb you come from, you don't have to give your full address, and then you will be timed. You are, of course, being recorded as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. It's my first ever council meeting. But I've been brought here because, I, Stephen Allison of Linden Park, have been brought here today to speak to council. I've been moved to do so by item 64, Tregenza Oval, Peter Bennett Organic Community Garden. As in terms of background, I come from Linden Park, and I noticed from the report that council put forward about Linden Park and the loss of trees and land in Burnside Council, that Linden Park on average has less trees, less spottable land and more hard surfaces than average in Burnside. And I think that is background to why there's a great amount of community concerned about the precious green spaces that we have. We are aware, of course, that the Linden Park Nursery is moving, and that leaves half an acre of community land vacant, and that council will be considering what to do with that land. And there will be reports first coming and discussion later today about what might ensue. Now, my specific question in my time limit is that the biodiversity nursery is moving from a half acre of community land to the space in Conningham Street. Is there sufficient land there for all the functions that the biodiversity nursery is currently undertaking? Particularly, I've heard that potentially tree growing and those kind of activities may need to may need further thought and consideration. If so, is there any chance for dual function on the old Linden Park Nursery site for the proposed Peter Bennett Community Garden and some of the existing nursery functions to remain on the site? I say that because it's a great open space for the community and has great potential for continuing some agricultural function for Burnside Council.
I have a point of order, Your Worship.
What's your point?
My point of order is that pursuant to council resolution that 15 minutes was set aside for public question time, as set out in the rules on page 6. That time has expired. It's been 15 minutes. We started at 7:04. And in my view, we should move to the next slide.
Sorry, but the public question time starts when public question time starts.
Which started when the mayor, which started when the CEO
No, that cannot be
questions.
included because that is part of last council meeting's response.
Well, then his response then went over 15 minutes, which was allocated to public question time last meeting. In any case, he's taken.
It wasn't 15 minutes of response, was it?
That's my point of order.
Yeah. I don't agree with the point of order, and I'm going to allow an opportunity for administration to answer that question.
Through Your Worship, thank you for the question. Through the development of the project plan for the Conningham Street site, our staff were heavily involved in terms of determining the space required to manage the city's biodiversity and nursery functions required, and we are confident that we can manage it from the Conningham Street site. With respect to your second question, Council hasn't decided or considered the future use of the Laurel Avenue land. There's a great number of options available, and some of that could be for a nursery or garden purposes as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your answers, very helpful.
And our second question? I'd just remind you of the 2 minutes, Mr Jacobson.
We're ready to go. Okay, thank you, Your Worship. My name is Jim Jacobson of Freeville. My questions tonight are regarding the minutes of your secret meetings and the expenditures of public money. Why does this council continue to try and keep its community in the dark by using one-word explanations as the agenda item for the minutes of secret meetings, like, quote, complaint, as has happened regularly in recent times, or has happened in another recent secret meeting, receipt of legal advice, when the Local Government Act specifically states that 83(4)(a), the Chief Executive Officer must, insofar as reasonably practical, A, ensure that the items on an agenda given to the minutes of the Council under this section are described with reasonable particularity and accuracy. Does the employees in the Council not understand the definition of reasonable particularity and accuracy, or do you prefer to keep the community totally in the dark? What sort of complaint are you discussing? A staff complaint, an elected member complaint, a complaint from a resident or ratepayer, or another false complaint from staff members or elected members against residents? Second question is, my understanding is that if you choose not to answer that straight away, my understanding is that private individuals receive from this council, either directly or indirectly, in excess of $400,000 of public money, either from the council or local government generally. I say private individuals as I understand the City of Burnside was not a party to the actions mounted against Councillor Bagster, particularly in the Magistrates' Court where the bulk of this money, I understand, was expended. Under what statutory authority, given the decision of Justice Lovell in City of Burnside versus Jacobson, did private individuals, including staff, elected members and contractors, receive public monies directly or indirectly from the pockets of Burnside or South Australian residents for private legal actions which they themselves have initiated? What plans does this new council have to investigate this appropriation of public monies to private individuals and, if recoverable, to obtain repayment of these monies? Thank you. That's my second question, which I'm sure you'd like to take on notice and give a considered response.
We're going to have to take both of those questions on notice. Your point about reasonable is something that we will follow up and get back to the next meeting about.
Thank you.
Now, I am going to move to item 10 and motions on notice, and items 11 and 12 until after reports of officers, as many of these reports need to be discussed and decided upon tonight. I'm going to read them through, and I'd ask you to indicate if you wish to withdraw any of them. So we will go through, and we'll start from 13.1 on the top of page 5. The Verge Development Policy. Councillor Piggott, you had that, because this was left over from last meeting. I'm going to give you the first option if you choose to take it up.
No, actually, I don't need you this time.
All right, so is there anyone who wishes to? Yes, Councillor Davey. And Councillor Davey, you also had your name against the Arts, Cultural Heritage Policy, so you would like to? All right, thank you. 13.3, Eastern Regional Alliance Water. Councillor Piggott. The review of the City of Burnside Strategic Plan. Councillor Davey. I think a decision that does need to be made in relation to funding. 13.5, voting. This is also needs to be decided tonight. Thank you, Councillor Hughes. The holding report, communications and marketing. No? Right, so we shall vote on that one after we've gone through them all, isn't it? Local Government Association of South Australia Ordinary General Meeting. We do need a delegate for that. Sorry? Someone needs to withdraw that one. Councillor Davis. The 2019-20 projects for inclusion in the draft annual budget, that also needs to be, all right, Councillor Lemon. The risk evaluation report, Councillor Davey. The revised risk management framework, no one. The proposed actions regarding parking petition for Union Street, Beulah Park, Councillor Hughes. and the annual canopy plan action plan. Councillor Lemon? I think that's all. Right, so we'll go back to the 13.6, the holding report, page 137. Councillor Carbone is moving. Councillor Piggott seconded. Those in favour? Right, against? Carried unanimously. And 13.10, revised risk management framework, page 241. Councillor Piggott has moved. Councillor Lemon seconded. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Right, so now we're going to move back to the Verge Development Policy review. I'm pretty sure that's what I'm just going to do. No, we were going to go through the other one first, weren't we? No, we're going to bring, we're going to bring forward, sorry, Mr. Alan Harvey. We're going to bring forward, because we have a visitor here tonight from Era Water, we are going to bring forward 13.3, which is on page 45. And I recommend that we go into informal session for 15 minutes initially, so that questions may be asked of, I thought it was going to be Mr. Brian Jenkins, but I just see it's Mr. Robin Fisher, who is the General Manager of Era Water, and I can just see Mr. Jeff Vogt just walking in, who's our independent member of the board who represents Burnside. So if you'd like to come to the centre here. Did I say that? You said Robin Fisher. Oh, I'm sorry, I said Robin Fisher, Robin English. Apologies for those people who are at home. Mr. English is the General Manager of Era Water, and as I said, Mr. Jeff Vogt is our Burnside representative on the Era Water Board. I do need a 2/3 majority, hands up, to accept we go into informal motion. So can I get an indication, please? Okay, thank you. Right, you would like to address us first, I believe.
I think I'll try and be very brief, because you've got a long agenda and because you've had the papers, and I'm sure by the nature of the questions, obviously a lot of you have read the papers, which is great. So I'm Robin English, the General Manager of Era Water. There are two matters that are coming before you tonight with regard to Era Water: the provision of additional bore capacity to get our injection capacity up, and the management of our funding requirements into the future. So the last statement that the Open Council would have been that in 2018-19 we would have had 120 megalitres of water available to sell, and that from 1920 we would have had 458 megalitres to sell. That would have had the financial consequences of Era Water being able to pay its way and sustain itself financially by 2021, from which point the constituent councils, of course one of which is yourselves, would have been seeing some return of funds to them rising over the next few years to a sustainable level. And of course, no further contributions to ERA from debt or any other source. Now, unfortunately, the scheme was commissioned in, no, it wasn't unfortunately commissioned, it was commissioned, but it's unfortunate that it didn't quite meet expectations. The 458 megalitres a year which it was designed to produce required an injection rate into the aquifer during the wet season and winter of 80 megalitres a second, roughly. We are getting injection rates of 50 to 60 megalitres because the system was designed with 5 bores, 5 injection and extraction bores, and in other words, the same bore injects and extracts, and one of them failed on construction. So we're 1 bore short, and we need to lift our injection capacity because that's the limiting factor at the moment. It's easier to extract than inject. So unfortunately, after a dry winter in 2018, we injected only 86.4 megalitres. It should have been something like 180. We should have been extracting 120, and we expect to extract 35, which is a big reversal. if we don't put in another injection and extraction bore, the design capacity of the project diminishes, and we will get to a point where the maximum that the constructed capacity can produce is 360 megalitres a year from approximately 2021. So that means we're nearly 100 megalitres down on the water we can sell each year into the future. If we added injection capacity and got it up to design capacity, we'd be selling roughly 458 megalitres a year into the future. And that, of course, has serious financial implications for the project. So we modelled 4 different alternatives on the ways to approach this. They were in your papers, and I'm quite sure I don't need to go over them now. It's clear from the modelling that the best option for the scheme is to return to design capacity. That's option 2B. We drill another bore. We have to drill another successful bore, so we're saying increase bore capacity. The next bore we drill has a failure or success rate of about 70% success. And this is an important point from a financial point of view for the council. If the bore is successful, we will know that after we've spent, I'll just take midpoint figures, so it's around these figures, after we've spent $70,000 or so. The bore will be drilled, we will find out whether it works. If it's successful, we then spend another $300,000 connecting it to our current system. So the risk on the bore being successful or not is about 70,000. You're not risking the 400,000 to find out whether a new bore works or not. So that's and we have a 70% chance of that happening. All the previous bores were drilled by our consulting engineers, WGA, and we had an 80% success rate. So I think they're being a bit conservative with 70, and they now have quite a clear idea of what the aquifer can do. It doesn't make it fail-safe, but they know a lot more about the nature of the aquifer, and we think they're the right people to drill the next bore. So our recommendation, therefore, to our constituent councils is that the bore be drilled to get it up to design capacity, and that we commence water sales in financial year 2020. May I just say something about that so that we're all clear? Once we've got 5 injection bores, once we have some average or above average winters, we start injecting 600 megalitres a year into the aquifer and taking out 458-ish. That means that underground in the aquifer, a stock of water, which they call various things, they call it a plume and a shadow and all sorts of things, but it's effectively a stock of water, increases over the years. If we get a dry year in 4 or 5 years' time, we'll have enough stock of water to take us through a dry year and still sell 458, we hope. So the sensitive issue of starting sales before the plume has developed is one of geology. We'd like to get more water in. But from a financial and commercial point of view, for the constituent councils, we want to start external water sales as soon as we can. It really improves the debt position, and it improves the long-term cost of the project. So that was the second part of our recommendation, that we commence water sales in 2020. And of course, that's subject to a reasonable winter in 2019. So the best thing we can all do is start rain dancing. Okay, that's the first issue. The second one is finance. We have, the project has borrowed money from the Local Government Finance Association for its share of this project. So just a bit of background, we got a grant of 7 million from the Commonwealth Government. The Water Resources Board of the Adelaide Hills gave 2 million So 9 million came in grants, which we have expended, obviously. We then have borrowed, we have authority to borrow 13 million, and we're getting close to that. We're $500,000 away. We expect, with cash flow projections, that we will run out of money in the middle of May 2019, so this is getting quite urgent. Now, how do we, assuming that the constituent councils agree that we should continue, how do we fund our operations after mid-May? Take one step back, if I may. We have been modelling everything on average years over long periods of time, and that's the right thing to do, according to our water engineers. But we're in a situation now where we've had a very dry year, so we thought, so that you knew what a worse position would look like, we'd model 5 dry years, including 2019. And that makes that gives us the upper limit to the amount of money we will need to fund it until we become self-funding. So we modelled 5 dry years. I would be extraordinarily surprised if they occurred. We must have faith. Australia has droughts, they end, and it rains. And I don't think this is going to occur, but it's the bottom line. So we said, in average years, we need another 1.2 to 1.5 million to see us through to self-funding. If we have 5 dry years, we need 1.8 to 2.3 to see us through to self-funding. We then modelled, and you'll see in the BRM Holditch annexure to your papers, 5 alternative sources of extra funding. We could borrow more from the Local Government Finance Authority. Each council could make an equity contribution, but of course that would mean you'd have to find the money before the end of this financial year. A combination of those, councils could prepay us for water allocations for delivery of water in the future. And of course that's not as uncomplicated as it sounds, because we first of all then have to produce the water, and it might just delay the contribution a bit. It might be effective, but I think it's quite a difficult option. And the final one is to sell the scheme entirely to a third party, or to get some investment, to get somebody to buy half of it, or whatever combination of those that we choose and that you approve. So we then compared the funding options, what implications they had for constituent councils. Debt is the approach we're all used to and you're used to. So the debt would rise, it would be paid for in the future by the income. All the models of ERA Water include the repayment of the debt and interest and funding us. So it would occur over time. Equity contributions I've mentioned. Debt has a greater negative financial impact on councils that use more water because of the way the water purchasing arrangements have been set up, and of course that's Burnside, the biggest water user. If this council and the other constituent councils were interested in either investment or sale of the project, it would have to be designed, I think, and of course we'd have to work out what the market would bear, but really what you'd want is all the debt covered so that you no longer had any debt. Would be terrific for the constituent councils if there were a few $1 million over that which you took into revenue, and part of the arrangements hopefully would include the original aim of the scheme, which is to provide to the constituent councils lower cost water. Okay, and after we'd had a look at those, and I'm nearly finished because I know you have a long agenda. After we'd had a look at those, we came to the conclusion and recommended to our board, which agreed, that the best approach was to borrow more from the Local Government Finance Association, and that the debt limit, which is now 13 million, be raised by 2.3 million to 15.3, so that we can borrow up to that level without returning to you. But there's some very important riders to that. In making the recommendations, I need to just go back one step. The way we fund ourselves now is at the last minute, when we need some money, we draw down on the loan, and that's when we incur the liability, not when you approve the 2.3, assuming you did. So when we draw down, the liability is incurred on that extra bit, and the interest starts to run on that extra bit. We do not draw any funds from the loan account unless it's pursuant to an approved budget. So your control, the constituent council's control over our expenditure is approving our budgets. You will get a monthly cash flow and debt level report from us, so you know what the debt level is, you know what our cash flow is, because that'll be part of your budget, and then we'll all be able to manage this very carefully. I've been in this position for 6 months, and in that time we've changed some of the financial arrangements and made them much better. I'm very confident now that we have control over our finances, not that we didn't before, but I feel comfortable with the way it's being done now, and there's certainly no drawdown going to get past me unless I'm happy as well and that it complies with your wishes. So those are our recommendations, and I'm happy to take questions, but I think I should stop and let you ask them.
Yes, we first of all need to extend, that was the 15 minutes, so, sorry, I haven't turned this on. That was the first 15 minutes, so we do need to have an extension of another 15 minutes, I'm suggesting. Councillor Pickett, can we have just show of hands, please? Thank you. All right, now, Councillor Davis, you have the first question there.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Thanks for coming in. You talked about timeframes to... I actually didn't want to discuss this because I understand we have a workshop on Thursday, but it piqued my interest, I suppose, so I'll ask my questions anyway. You said that there was a time frame till we get to surplus. If we don't drill the bore, then what is the expected time frame until we reach surplus?
We've modelled it out to 10 years.
Yep.
And it's not before 10 years.
Right.
It'll take a very long time. A thumbsuck would be 20.
Right, 20 years if we don't drill the bore.
So it becomes a loss-making project for you.
And if we do drill the bore, just remind me, what was the time frame? 2 years or something?
4 years, isn't it? 22, 23.
Okay. And my next question is, over the next 12 months, so if we granted the 2.3 million increase to the debt limit tonight, over the next 12 months, how much would you draw down on that 2.3?
This is a thumbsuck, so please don't hold me.
That's okay.
Running costs are about 700.
Yep.
Plus, and we'll spend this before we get any water sales income that is substantial, because we'll get our income from January 2020, and we'll be spending this money from July. So there's, for a year's running, is from memory 650, 700. We'll spend on the balance of the connections to the constituent council's usage points, so all your reserves where you buy water. That's 300,000 or 400,000 more to finish that. The bore will be 70,000
plus another 300.
and if it's successful, there'll be another 300. And then, by around Christmas time, I hope we'll start to get some income, but a good income. But again, rain dances are in order.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm taking a guess at 1.4 mil over the next 12 months that you need to draw down.
And then it'll come back with income.
And then your running costs will be offset by income.
Yeah, and then it'll start rising again next winter when we stop selling.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
My question relates to the external users. So my understanding is that all of the scenarios essentially would only be financially feasible if we can get those external users on board, and in most instances, well, to make it more financially feasible, we need to get them on board quicker. I guess my concern is the process to get them on board and the timing. You're saying you want them on board by 2020, we're now March. We're nearly towards the end of the year, so I guess I want to understand the process that you're going through to get them on board and get guarantees of their demands, and understand that, I guess, the timeframes that you see that will take.
Yes, and thank you, Councillor Hughes. I got your written questions too. Yeah.
Face to a name.
We've got two bodies phoning me and saying, "Give us water." One of them's City of Port Adelaide Enfield, and the other one is the Azuri Soccer Club. And some of the schools in the area have been spoken to, and their indication is we're definitely interested because of the price. We obviously can't charge SA water prices because it's not potable. So it'll be SA water less 15%, and at that, and 15 isn't settled, and at that price, I don't think we'll have any difficulty at all selling the water. But that doesn't give you comfort, because that's just what I think. I think as soon as we know, we have a better idea of the water we have available for this coming summer, so 1920, I've got a list of customers who have been spoken to in the past before my time. I've got a couple of ideas of my own, and I'll just start visiting them straight away. But when I wander through the door, I really do want to be able to say, I've got this much water to sell. If I don't want to go and, I'd love you to buy water. How much have you? I'm not sure. I'd rather just get to that position first. I really don't think it's going to be difficult, but I don't have a basis for saying that.
Councillor Piggott.
Could I have a question of administration first? I know we talked about a workshop on Thursday, but if the council was in a position to debate a motion tonight in regard to this, is that's obviously still a possibility? I don't know. I guess perhaps I'm just giving out optimism in regard to what I've heard so far. So, so thank you for that. I've got a couple of questions on the selling water 2020 and the fact the hydrologists would prefer to sort of cool their heels for a year or perhaps longer because of the impact it has on it. And you explained about that affects it maybe down the track. Is that purely you have less in there, so there's less to come out, and if we hit it dry in a couple of years, or is there more long term that, like it's sort of a child bore and we should take it a bit easily in the first year, otherwise it may have a long-term effect for the whole life? Does that make sense?
It has a lifetime effect at all.
It's purely a mass thing.
It's an ins and outs over the short term, but early in the project's life, the aquifer hasn't been pressured with enough injection.
Right.
So the more you put in, we'll find out the true performance of the aquifer. The more we put in and put it under pressure, and the hydrologists are very confident about it, but I'm conservative. Let's see what it actually does.
Yeah.
So it's just ins and outs early on, and the hydrologists say withdraw less in the first year or second year, and withdraw later more. But obviously there are imperatives to take the burden off the councils as soon as we can. So we've tried to reach a balance between the two and said we will start external sales in 2020 just to reduce the financial burden. But we're constrained. When you withdraw water from this aquifer, and I'm not an engineer, but the base groundwater is quite high in salt. So if you're drawing out what you've put in, it's low salt water. As soon as the salt content rises, you switch off the withdrawal because you've reached limit for that year.
Right.
And you have to put more back in during the winter.
Okay. I've got a couple, if that's all right. Yep. Might have to go for another 15 minutes. If I read you right, what you're saying is that based on the numbers, and you have 5 dry years for the next 5, the extra money you're seeking, or the extra limit, is the limit. You'll be able to survive 5 dry years if we increase it by $2.3 million tonight.
Yes, that's right. That's what we expect.
And if you happen not to get 5 dry years, and it's better than that,
We don't draw from the
you'll
loan.
have change. You won't need all that.
We just won't draw, so the money stays with the Local Government Finance Association. We don't pay any costs.
Yeah, okay.
So it's very flexible.
When you say you're selling...
Sorry, just to clarify that, we aren't absolutely certain about that because, there are contingencies and so forth, but we've built in considerable conservativeness in it. There's a reasonable prospect of certainty, probably about a 90% prospect is my estimation, 95%, but, we had a bore that went wrong, we had a dry year we didn't expect, and so there is some small possibility that may not be sufficient, but it's really minuscule. It's like any budget, the wheels can fall off unexpectedly.
Yeah, no, I understand. It was perhaps an unfair question, and I think, Jeff, you've given me a political answer that, who knows what disasters might befall, and you're back in the next 5 years. But I think the key point, is the fact that what you're saying here is 5 dry years, all else being equal, and all your assumptions going as you see, this does the job, is what you're saying. Yeah. So,
absolutely, yeah.
So in terms of selling to people next year, can I come back? We only had 35 megalitres or something to sell this year. If it was an average year in 19, and you get the bore and it works and everything goes as you plan them, how much water would you have for sale next year as you see it? You might have told me. Well, that's the average year. 300, right, okay. And at the moment, the commitment to councils is 205 or something. So getting everything right, you would potentially have 100 megalitres for sale to people outside the 3 councils. Right, okay. I understand your optimism. That's excellent. Councillor Hughes just said if it's a dry year, it's 150. Yep.
So you wouldn't cover your contributing councils in a dry year next year?
Actually, and thank you. That was the question I was going to ask. What's the position in regard to? We only get 150 if it's a dry year. Do the councils get the first 200, and then you feel you need to? Other customers only get it after that. Is that what you're working on?
Just press your speak button. Just press your speak button so we can hear you.
The councils will decide that. We'll come to you and let you know. If you want more water, we'll sell less, but each time we sell externally, it does our finances good. So if you chose to take 204 between the 3 of you, that's great. We'd sell the balance.
Can I ask a question? Sorry on that though. You're wrong, but so you're saying it does our finances better to sell externally? I guess because we're already paying, but then we're not getting our water because we're committed. So we're guaranteed to take.
We're paying the higher rate.
The question is why is it better for us to sell externally?
It's better for us to sell externally if we're able to supply councils. I think that's what Robin's saying. But if in fact we have insufficient to supply the councils, we should maximise the amount that we sell to the councils because we get SA water rates from the councils. We'll get less than SA water rates from external customers. And I think that's what Robin was trying to say. And the way we would be intending to write the contracts with the external customers is we would sell it to them below SA water rates provided we could supply so that they get bargain water or lower cost water if it's available. But if not, their fallback is to go to SA water and pay the same rate they would have anyway. So that makes it attractive for them contractually, but it also provides that means that we meet the original idea of the scheme, which was to supply water to the councils wherever possible.
Have you
One
finished?
final one.
Okay.
Can you tell me there was where, in terms of getting it up and running, the capital project was 22 something was when we first did this, 22.6. We're still sorting that out. We got most of it done, but we're still, there's 400,000 now to get connections, which I think was supposed to be in it. There's another lot next year on the same sort of thing. Where is that going to land in regard to compared to the 22.6 that was anticipated at the start?
Still expected to be under that.
Still expect to be under it.
After my caution from the left here, I won't say by how much.
Yeah, that's good. And so the reason why actually you're in need of more funds than you originally thought is really around the delay that we've encountered in getting it up and running and getting enough water to sell. Would that be fair to say?
That's right. It's the delay and the very, very dry 2018. It was the worst year we could have had a dry year.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Jones. Oh, we have to extend for another 15 minutes first. And I do believe that we need to do that because not everyone has had a chance to ask questions. So show of hands, please. Yeah, it's not equitable. No, it may not be equitable, but I think some people have had a lot of questions and others have none. Councillor Jones.
My first question is, what's the rush? Okay, you've done your financial modelling, which is all or nothing. You do this, or you do this, and you've got a 10-year result. The fact is, I don't believe that technically this works necessarily. I'd like to see you actually have 360 megalitres in the ground that you can actually sell. Technically it works. Number two, I don't believe you're going to sell it. And number three, I don't believe you're going to sell it for the price you think you're going to. So to say that you've proved that option 2B is superior, I just don't believe it.
Nobody interrupted over there, so please let him have his question. Okay.
Lecturing somebody that's coming to answer questions?
So you've said that you're within the price range. The fact is you're not. You've come back, this is now I think the third time that you're coming back to council to borrow more money. So it has cost more than you expected to do. You haven't got the water you think. I don't think you're going to sell it. I'd like it to be proved wrong. Why don't you keep it as it is, demonstrate that it works with 360 megalitres, that you can collect the water, you can sell it. When you've done that, you can come back and say, actually, Harvey, you're wrong. It's a great success. Invest another $2 million to bring it up to scheme capacity.
It's debatable whether that was a question, but there was a question, yes. What's the rush? There was a question.
What's the rush?
Yeah.
Why don't you just wait and see if it works, you can sell it. Once you've demonstrated that, then we'll spend the extra money.
Well, I think there are a couple of answers to that, Harvey, and they're very valid questions, I think. The reason we have an urgency is we run out of money in mid-May. So we need some more money to cover the period. Should we drill the additional bore? The modelling shows that if we don't drill the bore, financially, we push out the return substantially because we are below capacity.
I understand, but it is a 70-year project. It's not going to kill us to wait 2 years?
No, but it'll certainly reduce the rate of return. It'll reduce the flexibility that council might have if it wishes to sell out of the scheme and have it operated by a different organisation with the same contractual arrangements for water supply. It'll reduce that flexibility for council. So, and slow it down quite, by maybe 2 years, 3 years, if that's what you're saying. Your assertion about not being able to sell water, I can understand as a reservation because we don't have any contractually binding obligations yet, but we have considerable enthusiasm from the bodies that Robin's mentioned, and in the past, and we haven't been poking the bear because we don't have water supply and we don't want to go and raise people's expectations and get them cranky. You told us and then you're not supplying what's going on. We're deliberately not going out and talking to people about it. When we do go, and if we offer water at 10% below SA water prices, I would have thought anybody who gets offered that water, provided they're a significant user, would say that's got to be a better deal than paying SA water prices. So I do not understand why.
There's a very high risk, though, in your risk register, I understand, that SCOSA might not allow you to do that?
We have a risk in the risk register about that, quite right. But we believe it can be managed. So it is high in terms of initial risk, but with the management process, you know, risks have the raw risk and then they have mitigations and you come to the final risk. With mitigations, then it's relatively
But
controlled.
you might be selling below cost and the SCOSA will say, no, not allowed to do that.
We might. There are constraints, you're quite right, but we believe within those constraints, and the best advice we've got so far is that we will not be breaching their requirements. But until we get an actual contract and go and test it, yes, there could be potential issue. We can't guarantee anything about what a SCOSA might approve till we go there. I mean, I don't think it'd be wrong for us to sit here and promise you things that can't occur, but on the balance of probabilities and all the best advice we've got, that is a very unlikely outcome. And that is a little bit of why we've asked for, we're not going to borrow $2 million, and we're not sitting here asking to borrow $2 million, we're saying $2.3 million to cover 5 years over the 5-year period. Because you rightfully point out we've been here before asking for more money and say, that's it, give us a little bit, and we were given a little bit extra last time, and we'll never come back and darken your doorstep. We want to make sure this time that we can manage within it. And our real estimates are that, and the best information we've got is we can manage within that. As I said earlier, there can be absolutely no guarantees because even with the best will in the world and the best management, unexpected things might happen.
Councillor Henschke.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for coming in this evening, and I've heard so much from all those elected members, so appreciate it. I'm losing my voice, so excuse me as well. Now, thank you, Harvey and everyone. Look, you know, at the time, waterproofing Adelaide, it was such a scheme, we really needed it. Since then, we've got the desalination plant. We've got a lot of history here, but my question is to you, if we decide, after our workshop, of course, on Thursday, we can talk more about this, but can you go away and let us know, please, how much it will cost to run this scheme if we do the things that Harvey was talking about here? Is just let's take a pause on the situation, run at a minimal flow, minimal operating cost, and we have to do this to keep the equipment operational. We've heard about this with the desalination plant, for example. We've got to keep it ticking over, got to keep water running through the UV plant, etc. So we need to know what those costs are, because what we don't want to do is damage the very expensive equipment that our ratepayers have invested in. We have millions of dollars on equipment that's sitting there. We've got to make sure we look after the UV plant, we're running it, and the warranty conditions in particular are kept and are preserved. So I would like to know that for Thursday, please, so that we have another option to consider. And so that really is my main question there, and I don't want to repeat what I've heard from others, but you know, I do feel it's one of those things where we develop a project up in good faith, and it's a noble project. It's technically risky, but we still need to have a technically proven scheme, and it does seem like it might make sense to keep the scheme running, inject, and actually, again, I would like to ask a question, what the hydrogeologists are saying about proving the groundwater supplies. What are the risks with that groundwater plume? You talked about the salinity issue, if we draw too much from the plume. So if we can prove technically that we can create a sustainable plume, that would be fantastic. So just some things for Thursday. Thank you.
Can I just be clear? That means we don't increase bore capacity. We run it at its size now. That means we expect to sell 360 megalitres a year and inject 500 megalitres a year, something like that. And you want to know what the cost outcomes of those are, of that scenario is. We don't spend any more capital. Of course, we'll have to spend the 300,000 or 400,000 on the remaining connections to the constituent councils, and then we stop and we run it as it is? Or are you envisaging just something much less than that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm envisaging the minimal spend. Because we need time, we need to understand the scheme is technically feasible. We need convincing, and we need to be convinced that we have contracts that can underwrite this project. Look, I know your customers need to be certain, but maybe the contract clause could be, well, look, if we don't have the water, then you have to get it from SA Water. You know, contracts can be drawn up. We need an underwritten project so that our ratepayers are confident they have a return on their investment. Thanks.
Councillor Davis.
Could you just explain to me again, so if you drill another bore, pay $70,000, and it works, so you spend the other $300,000 to commission it and have it operational, how will that change the scheme going forward? What's the benefit to that additional bore?
The benefit is you get up to the injection capacity you require.
Yep.
So instead of getting 360 out of the scheme each year, you get 458-ish. And it gets to design capacity, and the financial implication of reaching design capacity is that it becomes self-sustaining in 3 years.
Okay.
The financial implication of running it at minimal, obviously you understand it means the 3 constituent councils contribute each year into the future until you make different decisions, or you decide to sell the scheme and pass the risk to someone else.
Okay. And if we don't drill the bore, because to my mind it's actually a very small amount of money in the scheme of things, just to keep it running for the next year, that's 700,000 just to keep it running.
If we don't drill the bore, that's correct.
So it's 700,000 if we drill the bore now, and that would just be for a period of 1 year really before you start selling it. If we don't drill the bore, then that cost will be higher. In my view, the maintenance cost will be higher because then you're not making the income to offset your...
The end result will be a greater contribution from the councils to keep us running.
Yeah. So you're asking us for... So the way I understand this, you're asking us for 2.3 tonight to drill an extra bore. If we don't drill an extra bore, you'll come back asking probably for more than 2.3 to keep the scheme going because we won't have the funds to pay for itself.
No, I don't think that's right. I just think it goes on for longer.
Goes on for longer?
Yeah, it goes on. I'm not sure what the number
So just break even for a longer...
But
okay.
it is a loss-making project for more than 10 years on that scenario if we don't drill the bore.
Okay.
And in my view, for a lot longer than that. But the losses will diminish very slowly over time.
Oh, okay, so that...
And when we've got the plume developed and we get a regular income of 360 megalitres a year, you still have to contribute each year just to make it run.
Yeah.
But much less over a very long period of time.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Councillor Hughes.
We won't decide it anyway. Sorry, just coming back for some more questions. So I just want to understand the implications of timing. So from reading the documentations, you need approval for additional funds before May, but the decision on the bore is not required until September. Am I reading that correct? There was something in here around decision in September for the bore. Got my 500,000 pages. So on
I think
on page 54 it said timing, increase injection capacity. It needs to be operational by May 2020, decision by September 2019. So there's no urgency on the decision on the bore. It's only the additional funds to keep you running past May.
That's right, but what we're asking you for is 2.3 million for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
So your control over the expenditure will be passing the budget.
Yep.
We will put a budget to you for 2019-20, which will include, assuming it's approved, will include drilling a bore and completing the connections and running costs. So even if you approve 2.3 million tonight, we wouldn't spend it except starting in May to run ourselves. We'd spend, by the end of this financial year, according to our projections, another 224,000. Then we'll start planning the bore as soon as the new financial year starts. That's a 3-month planning period. We then drill the bore, hopefully before Christmas, and we find out where we are. We definitely need, if you want to go to design capacity, we need to have an operating bore by the end of April next year. And that's what will take the time in that is the bores drilling is reasonably easy, but it's the connections, the engineering of the connections, because this bore is likely to be furthest from our current infrastructure. That's going to take some months. So that's from the time, if we said go, we look at 9 months and we've got it working.
Sorry, I do have more questions, but I am cautious that we are meeting on Thursday, but I will not be here on Thursday. I'm just gauging the room. I guess I just want to understand a bit more about the mention of a dry year and talking about 50% less harvesting than average. And I just want to understand how 2018 compares to the dry year. Is that the dry year? So I'm just saying in the documents it talks about the dry year scenario, and just from, I guess, from a statistical point of view, you say it's 50% less than an average year, but what was 2018 relative to an average year?
It wasn't 50% of an average year, it was above that. But one thing, you know, there are a whole lot of little complications which I haven't mentioned, one of which is a number of megalitres of water were used for commissioning.
Yeah.
So we just had less to sell. Say again?
Surely that should have been in the plan.
Yes, it was, as far as I understand it. It just, there was so little water from the 2018 winter. A greater percentage of that, although the same megalitres were used for commissioning, but we had so little. So it cut down what we could withdraw to 35.
I'm just going to go back to Councillor Hughes because then there's 2 others on the list, so I won't have...
Yeah, oh, look, I'm happy
but
to...
before we do, we need another 15 minutes. Show of hands, please. We don't have... 1, 2, hang on, we're going to need 8. 1, 2, 3. We have 8.
So I guess also in terms of the getting those external users on board and the cost of those connections, we're saying Era Water would bear that cost, but we, in terms of, I guess, there was mention about a business case and obviously understanding where those users are in adjacent to our current scheme. So I'm assuming that the board would be looking at where are those users relative to our existing scheme to minimise the cost implications of additional users.
The cost implications of connection can be negotiated, so we can pay for it ourselves, but we will put the budget before the 3 councils and get approval for it for next year. If we need a variation to that in order to pay for the cost of connections, we'll come back and seek that. So you've got control of it.
So that's not included in this 2.3 though, so there potentially could be an additional cost as well.
The 2.3 is actually a borrowing limit. It's not an expenditure limit in the budget, which is yet to be prepared.
Yeah.
So that I think is an important point. It is what we believe we need to have to tide us over the next 5 years or so till the scheme becomes definitely cash flow positive, allowing for negative years. It is not seeking approval for individual expenditure items. That will come on a year-by-year basis. The other alternative that we have canvassed at the board level, and this was probably before Robin's time, that's why I grabbed the microphone, not like the sound of my own voice, but the other option is that these people being connected may prefer to pay the cost of connection and receive a lower cost of water. And of course, that would make sense for us to offer them a lower cost of water to offset the cost of connection if that's their preference. Yep. And we haven't yet negotiated with that. As Robin said, and as I've said, we don't really want to get into detailed negotiations till we're reasonably confident the water supply is going to be there, and it just hasn't been. And of course, we've been flat out trying to get the scheme managing the issues that have arisen, the extremely dry year, the fact the board didn't operate, the fact that we didn't have a general manager of substance till 6 months ago has meant there's been a lot of other things to work on.
I'm happy to.
Okay, Councillor Henschke, and then it's Councillor Lemon.
Oh, thank you again. Very briefly, just a quick question regarding, you mentioned the possibility of a sale of this whole scheme. So would it be an option for our ratepayers and residents that we just transfer the risk of a new bore onto a potential buyer instead of us, our ratepayers, gambling the 70% chance that it will be successful?
I can't answer that question with any definition, but just commercially, from my experience, that would be the worst way to sell the scheme. If you decide that you want to get rid of it and transfer the risk to somebody else, then the best thing to do, in my view, is drill the bore, get it up to design capacity, have it working perfectly. While we're doing that, over the next 9 months, deal with the buyer and say, we will deliver you this scheme, this is the price. If we did what you suggest, I think the price would take a disproportionately large hit because of exactly how you started your question, which is, I'm taking the risk of a bore, so I want less, I want to pay less. So I think if it's decided to dispose of it, then it's best to complete it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I have a quick question. There was a suggestion earlier on that we should just limp along without the bore for a couple of years. And my question is, have you done any modelling on how much more expensive it will be to actually drill that bore in 2 or 3 years? Everything goes up in price, so I'm just curious.
Thanks. There's no modelling being done specifically on that. There's no reason to expect it would be enormously more expensive. The real issue is that the cost of operating the scheme is largely fixed. There are some variable costs for electricity and there are some variable costs for chemicals and so forth to treat what's there. But the wetlands themselves need to be continuously serviced because you can't leave them to die, otherwise you've got to rebuild the whole thing, and there are a lot of other fixed operating costs. So putting more throughput through any business that's got very high fixed costs and low variable costs, the more volume you can get through, the much better off you are, because every extra dollar of revenue is probably 90 cents of profit compared with a scheme where you've got high variable costs and low fixed costs.
Councillor Piggott.
2 quick ones. You mentioned about doing a deal potentially with external customers on the basis that you can have the water, at a cheaper price, subject to availability. Is there anything stopping you doing that now? So I take the point about we don't know how much water we're going to have next year, but is there anything stopping you actually talking to those people and saying, look, we might be 2 years away from getting this water, but we're going to get this water. We've had, got total support from all our 3 councils, and we'd like to lock you in, so that we can, get you water eventually, hopefully next year. Is there any reason why you couldn't start that now? Or perhaps that's what you intend?
We would like to do that. The constraint is that right now we've got a cash flow issue that'll burn out, and so the effort of management and the board is going to make sure our solvency is guaranteed.
Yep.
And to make sure that we're managing the scheme, the commissioning is still being worked through because of the lack of water, to make sure all of that is set up, and that's where our effort is going. We've got budgets to prepare. Once that's done and we get some free time, the board would certainly be keen to go.
That's exactly what you do. Great.
Yeah.
And the last one is, if I read the papers right, it's a 2.3 request based on the 5 dry years, and I appreciate your conservatism. It's 1.5 if you get 5 average years. Is that fair to say? So there's 800,000 difference between average years and the rain dance is sort of working versus 5 dry years.
That's the best estimates we can provide, and that political answer I gave you earlier was simply that they're estimates, they're based on best advice. When we came this time last year and asked for additional borrowing, that was based on best advice at the time, and as we know, the rainfall wasn't there.
All I was getting at is there's an $800,000 component in there.
Absolutely.
As insurance against 5
correct
dry years. Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
May I just ask one question? I know that the pipelines, etc., are available already to Azzurri. Is that the case for if we were to supply to Port Adelaide Enfield, or does that require extra construction of extra pipelines?
My understanding is that requires extra pipelines to be constructed.
Hence extra cost, which are included in the 2.3 million, or is that going to be in addition?
That'll be in addition, but as Jeff said, it'll be negotiated with the purchaser. I was talking to, I mean, some of the conversations I'm having in the midst of other things are with these people. So last week I chatted to the guy at Port Adelaide Enfield, and he said, when can you give me water? I want some water. I need cheap water. So with an attitude like that, I would expect to be able to negotiate something that was reasonable.
Except that we have to pay for the connection to get
Yes.
the water there.
And maybe they'll pay and it'll come back in slightly cheaper water for a year or some combination of that. But to address your initial question, which is it in the 2.3 million? No, it isn't.
Councillor Davis?
Sorry, just one more. There seems to be this, you keep saying that it'll be negotiated. I'm of the view that it'll be negotiated and that we're not forced into paying for the connection costs as well. It would depend on the client and how much they want to, wouldn't it? It would, like that's a negotiation. I wouldn't be accepting here today that carte blanche, Era Water will pay for your connection costs. That's something to be negotiated commercially between Era Water and the agency. I think probably it's unhelpful if people keep repeating that.
Agreed.
Councillor Jones?
So dollar per kilolitre, what are you going to sell it for?
I don't know, but it'll be something like 10 or 15% off SA water price.
So Gap Water's $2.12 a kilolitre?
Correct.
It'll be 15% lower than that.
No, 15% lower than SA water
So
potable.
it'll be more expensive than SA Water Gap Water.
Yes,
So why would I buy it?
because it's available to you and
As is
it's
Gap
cheap.
Water.
Is Gap Water available to our customers? I'm not sure. I don't think so. Gap Water stops in the city centre.
The other issue is it's not connected, and the cost of connection, we've been advised, is prohibitive. To put a pipe in, sufficient capacity to get it from here, from where the nearest connection point is very, very significant, much greater than our ability to supply people.
Right. I don't have any more elected members on my list now, so I am going to suggest that we move on. But before we do, can I please thank both Robin and Jeff for coming in and giving their time tonight and answering some fairly gruelling questions. So do appreciate your time and your effort and the work that you are doing. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having us.
Now we're going to move back into formal time, and it is back to Councillor Piggott.
Could I move that we defer debate of this item until the next council meeting?
Do I have a seconder, please? Right, Councillor Hughes. All in favour? Those against? Looks like it's one against, so it's not unanimous. All right, thank you. Then we will now move. I would like to move to Councillor Davis's motion without notice.
Yes.
Because I think it follows sequentially and sensibly from the motion that you've just passed. So I'll hand it over to Councillor Davis.
I'd like to move that Councillor Hughes be appointed as a Deputy Board Member for the Era Water Board until 31 December 2019.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Lemon, you wish to speak?
I didn't hear you speak.
I'm surprised and delighted by this nomination.
He needs to speak.
Oh, I thought I was speaking, but that's all right. Okay. I think that, so just to explain it, at the moment we have a current board member, Jeff, who's not here anymore, who currently represents us there. Most other councils have a deputy board member who can assist them if the main board member is unavailable. I think it would be, given Sarah's expertise and inquisitive mind, especially on this issue, I think that she would be a fantastic candidate to act as our deputy board member. And essentially what would happen is if Jeff's there, he would attend the board member, but Sarah would have the opportunity to sit and listen. But it would also give her access to ask any questions, and I think that she'd do an excellent job in representing us on that board. I didn't give her that much chance to object to it, but yeah.
And importantly, I think after our meeting on our workshop on Thursday, there is another board meeting that Councillor Hughes will be able to attend, even if she doesn't have speaking rights, she will be able to attend. So can I please now move over to Councillor Lemon?
Yes, I concur with everything.
All right, does anyone else wish to speak? Right, then can I have an indication of those support that, please? You didn't want to speak again? All right, looks like it's unanimous. All right, thank you. Carried. Now I'm going back to reports of officers, and I'm going back to 13.1, which is, of course, the one that was left. Yes, Mr. Harvey, you can please come forward again. I'm sorry about, an hour later you get there. So this is Councillor Davey, Verge Development Policy, page 17.
Thank you, Your Worship. Get to the right place. No, sorry. We've been moving around the agenda tonight. Yes, I move that the report be received and that 2, Council adopt the revised Verge Development Policy and actively promote this to our residents on the website, in focus and local press. So I thank the administration for updating in a much needed policy and bringing it into line with our sustainable development principles, environmental principles. There's a lot of work done on it that really improves how we manage, or how we seek to manage our verges, which are very important within our streetscapes and environment. The only issue is that there is a bit of confusion out in the community about verge maintenance, and I think we all know about the variables that exist out there. Some people expect that they own their verges and they don't want council to even plant a tree on them. And then we have others who maintain them and water them and just happily go along doing that. There are others who plant out the verges and then sell the house and move on. The next homeowners might not want to maintain those verges and they turn into weedy wastes. So this is much needed guidance and direction as to how we can manage this. I just think that we actually need to promote this so that the community know what the boundaries are, that they actually need to apply if they want to put an irrigation system in, or put a nice little paved area around it, or put a boundary around trees, or do some of the things that some of our residents want to do. So that's just the rationale for my asking for the promotion of it. Thank you.
I'll just go. I'd like to second that. I particularly like the idea of artificial turf being excluded and plants being limited to natives. That I think is wonderful. And I agree also with Councillor Davey about the publicising verge maintenance. It's something that there's a lot of ambiguity in the community about, particularly when proposed footpaths come into play. Some people spend a great deal of time and money and love, developing their verges. I know of certain examples in Linden Park where people have had to really, basically destroy what has been a lot of time put into their verges. Now, obviously, that's just one example of things. But do I mow it? Does the council mow it? What am I allowed to do? There's a lot of, as I said, ambiguity out there. So I certainly support the publicising of this.
It's been said. Paul's covered it.
So we are up to Councillor Henschke.
Oh, thank you very much, Mayor. The policy was edited, and I see that there's clause 6.3 was deleted, which seems like what the council used to do at no cost for residents, and that was to remove existing material and replace it with 75 millimetres of loam. So in the past, residents could request that the top layer of compacted material was removed and refreshed with fresh loam. So the question is to the administration, how much will the council save by removing this service from residents?
What? Through the Mayor, very little. So there are very few applications that ask for that to occur. However, when they do, it is an undertaking. It is a burden on us to go and do that. So yeah, to answer your question, it's minimal.
I understand that there is a full report coming on verge service review that is coming fairly shortly, so a lot of those questions and answers will be raised during that point. Oh, there'll be a workshop on that as well. Next person is Councillor Davis.
The only point I'd like to make is in terms of artificial turf. There are occasions when nothing else will grow and green looks better than like rubble. So in those circumstances, I think it is appropriate. It looks a lot better than rubble.
Councillor Turnbull.
My question is, does an officer actually come and check the verges? Because I have one, I didn't know anything about it, and nobody's come and told me to pull my non-natives out. And up the road, there's a whole lot of funny-looking succulents they must have got from Auntie Mary, because they've been planted up, they look awful, and they're still there. And so I just wonder if anyone does come and check.
Through the Mayor, the addition that Councillor Davies put on to the recommendation probably deals with that in terms of publicising what we want from our community in terms of applying, letting us help them, support them through that process. It hasn't always been the case that people have come to us to ask permission to do that, and certainly many people have gone ahead with all the best intentions and read about their verges as they see fit. We would want to control that as much as we can from here on in, and I think that the policy as it now stands and the recommendation that is up there will help to achieve that. It's not retrospective. I don't believe that we'll be going out there and demanding that these verges are turned into what we think they should be. If they're being maintained and they're appropriate, they're not unsafe, then I think for the immediate future, we'll leave them well alone.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Turnbull. I think this policy is absurdly dictatorial. If I want to buy some cheap ERA water to turn my verge into the handguards of Babylon, I think I should be allowed to, frankly. So I think this is just nonsense.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Artificial turf verges, they're scattered through the wards. I notice them when I go on my walks quite often. So will this policy mean that if I had an artificial turf verge that I would have to rip it up?
Through the Mayor, no. So this is not retrospective. It moves forward from this point, and we're much stronger about where, well, according to this policy, we wouldn't allow that to happen. We understand what synthetic materials like that do to the environment. We understand collectively what it does when it comes together. So, one single verge, okay, 2 or 3 done the same way, you know, the magnitude of effect is increased. So no, it's not retrospective, but from here on in, it's something we would not allow to happen.
Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I wasn't going to actually enter the debate, but there's a couple of things I want to say. One is I don't think artificial turf is acceptable under any circumstances ever. When you look at the environmental, detrimental environmental effect of a large area of plastic and what it has on temperature, it's massive. And if you're going to stick artificial turf around a brand new tree, it'll kill it with heat on a 47-degree day. So I just think that there's no excuse for having a pretend plastic grass strip. But the other thing that I actually thought might be useful is if we are going to get our people to embrace this and we are going to get people to actually look after their own verges, notwithstanding it's within guidelines and strictures, and Auntie Mary's succulent garden up the road mightn't be to anyone's taste, but it's looked after presumably. Perhaps what we ought to do is, instead of having garden awards, we should have Proud Verge Owners Awards, and that might be something that we could in fact do to get people to take responsibility. My understanding is that it costs us $300,000 a year to mow the verges, or something of that nature. If we actually got our residents to look after the verges, we would save a lot of money and our streets would look a lot better. Just a thought.
Councillor Hughes.
No, I was going to, I think Hel was covered.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Alan, just a question on, I think there's a bit of confusion around this. We don't do things retrospectively. Now, with artificial turf, it's always going to be retrospective because they're always going to put it down first, and then we're going to have issues afterwards.
Day zero.
Through the Mayor, we would hope that by advertising it more broadly, again, as the addition of on the recommendation helps us do that, then we would get that information up front. We would get that from the residents in their application. We could work with them around what was appropriate, what we could support them with, and there are many things that we can do to help them with the skill sets we have, with the things that we can supply. Then we can support them through. Even in situations where nothing will grow, something will grow, and it's a matter of finding the right thing to grow in that spot, using the skill sets that we've got.
Sorry, Julie, just to add to that, from today, once Council adopts this policy, if a resident puts in a verge that's not appropriate, and we are aware of it, we will then remove it from them. So, to answer your question, it's retrospective of existing artificial verges.
Okay, so if someone puts down artificial turf tomorrow, we take it out. Okay.
Councillor Turnbull.
My last question is, does this mean that you'll take the artificial turf and the funny old carpet off some of the roundabouts as well?
Through the Mayor, we will take that on notice, and we will work through that. Yes.
Councillor Henschke.
I am looking at the motion, and to promote this to our web residents, it says on the website, in focus and in local press. That's fine, but I think it needs to also include there that the group manager Community Connections takes carriage of this education program, whether the Community Connections group chooses the website, focus or local press, but if it could be managed through that group because they engage with the community quite broadly.
I was thinking of maybe a notice out with the next rates notice might be useful too. Is there any other debate? Oh, sorry, apologies.
Yeah, look, we will take Council's direction and we will promote it as thoroughly and as far as possible. That's fine. So we'll ensure the right people manage the engagement of this activity.
Right, so back to Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'll just briefly sum up. Thank you everyone for your interest. I certainly agree that artificial turf has absolutely no place in our environment in Burnside, and I'm very pleased that to hear that the group managers talk about how this will be managed. This is an investment in verges are council property. This is an investment, and all the work that the administration do is an investment in our environment and our streetscapes. So I think this is a very good outcome, and I hope you'll support it.
Those in favour? Those against? It wasn't unanimous, but carried. I'm going to recommend that we have a 10-minute break now, and then we resume with the budget issues, because I do believe that some of the people in the gallery are here for that purpose. So we'll have a 10-minute break, and then we will start with the budget. If that's okay? Yes? Good? Fine? Yes, we've got, and there's 3 more over there. Thank you very much. So can we have everyone seated, please, so we can move back into formal session? We don't need a motion for that, do we? No. Right, let's start again. Okay, so we're going to move now to 13.8 on page 146, the budget proposals. Now, you all received an email today from Paul, Deb, about the process we're going to go through for this. My suggestion is that we hear from each of the budget bidders for between 3 to a maximum of 5 minutes so that they can have that time to introduce their bid, and then we'll have questions. But in order to do that, we need to go into informal session. So I'd like an indication for 30 minutes, I'm suggesting.
Are you moving this motion then?
No, I'm not moving the motion. I'm asking for an indication as to whether you're going to support the moving into informal mode. Indication of 2/3, yes. Thank you. Right, it's not a motion as such. All right, thank you. And you heard what I said about instructions for those people who are going to do their bids, 3 to 5 minute maximum speaking. No, I'm just trying to advise people that I think that's a sensible amount of time, that people shouldn't need to spend more than 3 to 5 minutes to introduce their bid. Right, so our first one is, are we going to take the one?
Have you gone into?
Oh no, yes, we have. Now, Karishma Reynolds does need to speak to you all about these bids and the impact they will have on budget. It's not a motion.
We've just gone in.
This is informal. Okay. Right, all yours.
So as you know, the report before you, it tables the elected member budget proposals for inclusion or exclusion from the draft budget. When compared to the adopted long-term plan, there was 400,000 available for allocation for the operating projects. And there was, I think there's 709,000 available now for the capital projects. Going back to operating projects, the available amount now is only 22,000. So what we need to do tonight is work out with each of those 5 elected member proposals, whether we're going to include them or not. Once we go back into formal meeting proceedings again, we will go through them line by line, the way we do with our discretionary rate rebates, and you will have the opportunity to second them or support each one individually. I think, again, as mentioned before, yes, there is only 22,710 available. Having said that, that doesn't preclude you from including more or less. So, of course, if you don't include any at all, that's a saving to the bottom line for the operating ones, and that's less debt for the capital ones. If you choose to increase it or include more, then, of course, it could potentially mean a rates increase, or it could be a lower surplus than you would normally have. And it could mean a higher debt limit, a higher debt level as well. So again, it's up to you, but the option also is, of course, to take out some of the administration ones and swap them around. So I think if, just to keep it tidy, tonight we can speak about the elected member ones. We do have another workshop scheduled for next Thursday, and based on the decision tonight, we'll come back to that workshop and provide you all the figures and all the scenarios, and we can, again, you will have more opportunities as well to change your decisions on projects prior to the adoption on the 30th of April.
Well, we will start with Greenhill Road pedestrian activated crossing, Hazelwood Park, and that's Councillor Hughes, I believe.
Thank you. So probably will have all read the documents, but just to give you a bit of background, Greenhill Road is actually a dip-tier road and has an average, well, I think in 2015 there was an average daily traffic volume of 24,400 vehicles. A fatality occurred there in 2007 where a pedestrian was hit and killed by a car while attempting to cross the road. This did result in a pedestrian refuge being installed approximately kind of halfway across between Lancelot Avenue and Howard Terrace. I guess my big budget proposal comes from during the election campaign, meeting and speaking with residents. I had a community meeting at Hazelwood Park, and one of the key things that came out of that was the safety when you are crossing Greenhill Road to enter Hazelwood Park. I often do it with 2 young children on bikes, and it can be cross your fingers and hope for the best. There are a lot of cars that use that, a lot of cars obviously, and I think perhaps the pedestrian traffic that enters Hazelwood Park would increase if we did consider installing a crossing. In the background documents, I think you would have read that there is actually a application with DIPTI for funding, but it's not actually guaranteed that we will receive that. And I think in the past, perhaps it hasn't got up because it hasn't met their criteria for adding the crossing. So what's been proposed is essentially a pedestrian activated crossing, where you hit the button and you wait for the green man, and then you can head on. So I think really the bottom line with this one is it's something that quite often comes up. I think the administration mentioned in here it comes up semi-regularly. I'm not quite sure what the definition of semi-regularly is, not quite regularly, but more than infrequently, so half regularly. So I definitely think there is a need in the community. Oh, okay, sorry. So is it, there is need in the community. It was certainly something that I was canvassed when I was campaigning for the election, and I think that the fact that there has been a fatality, and I probably also didn't mention that there was a young boy hit in, I think it was November or October last year as well, a young 8-year-old crossing the road. So it is a safety issue. I appreciate that perhaps it doesn't meet DIPTI's funding, but I think Hazelwood Park is one of the most accessed, probably, community spaces, and I think to give people safe access to the park would certainly be helpful for the people in the community. Thanks. There we go.
Councillor Jones.
Yes, sorry. I support this, Sarah. I just had a question. Obviously, we're at the McGill Village presentation. One of the key sticking points seemed to be the DIPTI traffic flow modelling. Have they got the potential to say this is going to stuff up our traffic flows? Yeah. So that's just my whether that's a problem.
Through your worship, they've indicative, Magnus will tell me if I'm wrong, we're about to find out. They've indicatively advised that they will support it if we pay for it. It's just not a priority based on the numbers and their priority list.
Can I just point out that part of this, when it came up last year, was that we went to DIPTI to look at the potential of traffic lights at the intersection of Glenburn Road and Greenhill Road, and I actually raised that with Stefan Knoll today, and I'm intending to go and have a meeting with him and administration in relation to that. No, it's in addition to. All right, okay. I'm just letting you know that is a part of the conversation. If they've said yes, though, if DIPTI have said yes, then it's a different situation. So.
I think you did.
Councillor Piggott.
So I just had so what you're saying to us is better than what's in the administration comment. That's obviously moved forward so if we find the money. So my first question is, the 125 does it, is it? That's the cost of the whole thing. DIPTI says yes and lets us get on with it. And that's the signals we're getting at the moment, which is more positive than what here. Right.
Just with the funding that we've applied for, the black spot application that we've applied for, which is pending, is expected in June 2019, and that's to get actual funding from DIPTI as well.
So that would be better still,
correct,
obviously, but either way we look like we might get it. Right. One might cost us 125 grand.
Or it's a dry
cost. We got a rain dance.
Oh, sorry.
Through the chair, if this gets up, we would have to formally approach DIPTI, but it's our understanding that they're prepared for it to be in place if the council fully funded it.
I'm very conscious of the fact that a set of traffic lights, a set of pedestrian activated traffic
Excuse me, Councillor Lim, could you put your mic on, please?
Pardon? A set of pedestrian activated lights at that site are within, would you say, 300 metres of the T-junction at Devereux Road?
In that order, through the chair.
Yes. And then
maybe slightly more, but not much.
If there was then a commitment to put in a set of lights at the Glenburn-Green Hill intersection, you'd have 3 sets of lights within 1.5 kilometre.
That's true, but through the chair, that is a matter for DIPTI to advise us on.
So we could actually pass this and DIPTI could well come back and say, actually, it's not a good idea.
Through the chair, it may, at its discretion, but so far the indications are that it
Thank you.
Councillor Hughes?
Throughout putting this bid together, I did speak with Martin Cooper, and he provided a 2017 report, I think, which says essentially that DIPTI weren't keen to prioritise, certain flow routes of traffic, and probably wouldn't put in traffic signals there. But I'm not privy to any discussions that have happened since 2017. But I think you could pay these costs, and then things could change anyway, and traffic modelling could change the whole way traffic flows around the city. I think if you put in lights in somewhere else, you still would even if you put in lights at Glenburn Road, I think people would potentially still use this to access Hazelwood Park.
I don't have any other names on my screen here, so are you happy to make a decision on this? Sorry, we haven't moved into it.
Sorry, Mayor, I just pressed it as you were
Yep.
talking. My apologies. Do we have data on the amount of foot traffic going across to the park? I mean, I support in principle the idea, but I just wanted to know what data we have. Thank you.
Through the chair, we suspect DIPTI has been doing counts because there were people seen in the location recently doing counts, and it wasn't us. So we can seek that data from them.
Can I also just raise a point, perhaps to support this, that the pedestrian data may not be accurate because it isn't safe to cross. People may not actually use the location. So you may go and count the number of people using the crossing, but there may be people like me who drive to swimming because I do not want to cross Green Hill Road at 3:30 with my kids to get to swimming. But if there was a crossing there, potentially I would walk. So I don't know whether that data potentially could be skewed because of the location and people not using the road because of that. That's, unsubstantiated, but potentially a consideration.
Are you ready to go back into formal mode? No, we don't have to?
All the projects.
Oh, we have to go through all of them first. Sorry, apologies. I'm sorry I'm so stupid. This is new to me. I'm learning how to do this as you are. This process. I apologise if I've got it wrong. I am trying to get it right. Thank you. Now,
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, this is also a safety-related proposal. Breaking it down, it's in, I guess, 2 main parts with a third one tacked on. First is and look, this is largely piggybacking on reviews to the Integrated Transport and Movement Strategy and the Sport and Recreation Strategy. And I guess in practice, what this proposal would allow is for this part of those reviews to be expanded somewhat. The first element is allocating administrative time to auditing and identifying specified cycling routes within the city of Burnside, and identifying what could be done to enhance them, if anything. The second part is to make appropriate upgrades. We're talking about things like extra signage, additional infrastructure to assist cyclists, such as parking, bicycle parking, water fountains, these sorts of things. And then the third part is to also investigate how cycling routes could be expanded even further. And I think at $10,000, piggybacking on something that's administratively already underway, it seemed like something that we could quite easily get behind. Look, I've written about it in detail in the submission, so I refer you all to there unless you had any questions.
Councillor Hughes.
I had a question. So the review that was being done, would that be done internally by our administration? That hence it's not going out to an external consultant. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Yes, I certainly support this in principle. About 4 or 5 years ago, we did a very detailed cycling analysis to develop what used to be our bicycle plan for the city. It's 5, 6 years ago. Would that be relevant to use for this? And because we did a huge amount of work on that, didn't we? Which could be probably updated.
Yeah, it would certainly be a starting point. The issue that we as a council had when we tried to implement some of the actions or strategies identified in that plan is whenever we went out to consultation, it was quite routinely voted against by our community, and we didn't actually get too far with a lot of that plan. So we're looking to take a different tact to it this time. But yeah, we would certainly use that as a starting point to review where we are, what we achieved, and where we can go from there.
Thanks. Yes, just building on from that. Yes, I recognise and remember those challenges we had because we developed the bicycle route along Beulah Road and made a huge investment there for that whole through traffic link to Norwood and Payneham and St Peters. And then I remember when we were developing the Hazelwood Park plan, residents didn't want a bicycle route through Hazelwood Park. So they're the sort of limitations we've got to work with. But yeah, I think it's a great idea.
If I remember rightly, what we agreed to, if it wasn't last year, was the year before that, all plans would all consider cycling routes, cycling possibilities within all plans for development. As I remember, Ms Kennedy brought a motion to that effect last year. All development plans, as asset plans, would consider cycling parks, paths, routes, etc. Yeah, that we would not have a policy specifically for cycling, which we had, but we would consider the implications of cycling paths and cycling parks and cycling facilities in everything that we developed, which would include something like Conningham Street or Constable Hyde or anywhere we were going to be looking at development. Yes.
My recollection is that the cycling strategy was going to become part of our sport and recreation strategy, and it was going to be mainstreamed into everything we did in that way. Not so much as planning, but that it was going to be looked at in all those, because the cycling strategy itself was then rolled into other strategies.
Yeah, that's what I understood.
Yeah.
Into all other strategies.
Yes.
Then we will move on to verge upgrade, which is Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, this arose, well, it's been a long-standing issue raised by my residents, and it arose again in the election campaign for the residents who live opposite on that little inlet, park inlet, very unusual verge between 509 and 515 Glenburn Road at Hazelwood Park, and it's opposite the Feathers Hotel. So the report mentions 3 trees. I think there are actually 6 or 7 trees. So it contains all these trees, a sort of mulched area where all the vegetation has died. It's incredibly dry. It's very, very hot because it gets all the radiated heat from the road and then the surrounding footpath. And the local residents asked me when I was campaigning if it could be beautified and landscaped, and because there'd just been a tree lost, one of the trees had died because it was so dry, if we could irrigate it. So that's what my bid is for. It's been costed at $20,000. I'm actually happy to reduce that to 15 because I'm not sure that we actually need to build a retaining wall there. I'd just be happy, and I think the residents would, with the trees surviving and some landscaping and a bit of maintenance of that with an irrigation system installed. Because the other issue they have is they're very tolerant of the neighbourhood that they live in, but since the feathers upgrade, they have been exposed to a fair bit of extra noise and traffic and activity in the area, and the trees and landscaping and that buffer would provide a bit more peace and a bit of a buffer for them for the noise and activity. So I hope you can see your way clear to support this.
I don't have anyone else on the screen, so shall we move now?
Yeah, okay, if I can
sorry.
just talk. Yeah, respectfully, there are a number of verges like this in really bad condition, and I suppose I question whether the priority should be through a budget bid in this way rather than our general upkeep of everything in the city of Burnside, and I'm not sure I see a priority for this one.
Councillor Turnbull.
Yeah, although I'd love to see a little green oasis on this verge, I can't support it. The use of water in this council area needs to be scrutinised carefully. Where will green spaces have the most significance for the people? The parks. So we need to concentrate on the parks. And if administration, and consequently the people of the depot, can plant drought-resistant plants like shrubs and ground cover and put in fresh mulch like they have at Balliat Reserve, it would look good. And maybe on really hot days and during the summer, the water trucks can come past and give it a water. That also will provide a buffer zone as these shrubs grow up, extra trees or replacing of trees. So with the predictions of a dry winter and another dry summer, sorry, I can't support that one. I think we can do it with native plants cheaply.
Councillor Piggott.
I just had a question. It says in the papers we got that administration, I mean, it clearly needs something done. It is actually in a very poor state. There's no question about that. The difference between it needing a budget bid and not seems to be the irrigation. So administration seemed confident they could make it look okay. My question was whether it was reality that we could keep it looking okay without irrigation, was my question, if someone would like to answer that. Or even if they wouldn't.
Mr. Harvey?
No, we wouldn't, Mr. Piggott. I'm not interested in the question.
Through the Mayor, we can attempt to do so, and we can use plants which are suitable for that type of environment. We certainly grow them. We certainly have the knowledge, and we have enough knowledge to be able to have a good go at putting something in there which is simple to maintain and should stay.
And the reason it's sort of like it is now is that, I mean, it's been dry and it's not alone, but it's been like it for a while, is it? I don't know.
Through the Mayor, yeah, it has been like that for a while. It's not, in terms of verges, it's not untidy. So we haven't really spent a lot of time on it. But that doesn't mean that it can't be improved.
And you're saying even if this doesn't get up as an extra bid, you would sort it out within your operational budget, albeit without irrigation?
Through the Mayor, yes, we can do something better there. It probably won't be to the standard that Councillor Davey is attempting to upgrade it to, but we can do something to better its current appearance.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have anyone else on the screen, so are you happy we move on to the next one?
I'd like a right of reply, thank you, if I may. Okay. Thank you very much all for your input, which is very interesting. Could I remind people that all the roundabouts just about in Burnside are now irrigated because they're exposed to so much heat and an even hotter climate. So we maintain our roundabouts with irrigation. all this is asking for is $15,000 worth of investment in some beautiful trees, which actually are a bit of a corridor. The 5 or 6 trees that are there are a corridor for bird life and wildlife, and certainly beautify that whole area of the top of Glimburn Road. So I've happily reduced the amount from the $20,000 that was originally put up by the administration. I'm happy to not have retaining walls, but we really do need irrigation because the heat bank effect of that microclimate there is really excessive. And I think we need to make more of an investment in our environment in Burnside. I think we've not looked after this as much as we can, and as was mentioned before, we do have some little pockets of these areas around Burnside. I think we should fix them up and make an investment in them. So I would really like this one to go ahead. Thank you.
Right, we now move to Dulwich Master Plan Feasibility Study. We've only got about 5 more minutes left, so we're on page 154. I'm looking at the list on page 154.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Yes. Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a study to come up with a feasibility study. It's high level to engage with the businesses at the Dulwich Community Zone, local area zone. We've got, I don't know if you're all familiar with Dulwich, hopefully most of you are, but it's a very busy local community zone with many businesses, health businesses, doctors, pharmacies, small supermarket, cafes, design houses. There's a lot of creative activity going on there. The problems we have are pressures from traffic. There's a lot of traffic. There will be more and more pressure as the Glenside development occurs, Burnside development. The area needs attention. It's losing its attractive streetscape. The safety, I'm hearing from businesses about safety, the traffic, crossing of roads. It's well known that one corner is a precursor to an incident. We just don't want to see anyone being killed around there. Buses go through there as well. Anyway, so just quickly, we have an opportunity to engage with the businesses, identify their needs, and from that we'll be able to look at where we've got the opportunities for some really innovative strategic outcomes, maybe with transport and mobility for the aged community. Look, we've even got opportunities maybe with the Adelaide City Council with scooters, the scooter cycling. Who knows? If we don't engage, we will not perform. So I recommend that we spend some money developing this local community zone. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak? Councillor Hughes?
I just would like perhaps if the administration could expand on some of their comments. I guess they've said here that their preference would be to deliver the economic development strategy first and then investigate the needs. So I was just wondering if we could perhaps get a little bit more information on that process.
Mr. Schroeder?
Through Your Worship. Yes, our plans are to obviously, one, to do the strategic plan, which sets out council's priorities, including the area of economic development. This being an area that's primarily...
Excuse me, Councillor Davey, could you turn your microphone off, please?
so this being an area that has obviously importance in that respect. And then one of the strategies that we're developing at the moment that would fit under the strategic plan is the economic development strategy, which would also guide how we sort of approach these type of precincts. And the last one is, of course, the planning reform that's going on at the moment, which talks about zones and things like that as well. So our preference would be to finish those first before we sort of start looking at individual areas.
And what would be the timing to finish those first?
So the strategic plan we're looking at putting to council in next, I think, April off the top of my head. Sorry, 2020,
Okay.
sorry. Economic strategy, looking at trying to get finished around about July this year, 2019, and planning reform will basically go live on 1st of July 2020. So that will go up until about 30th of June.
So potentially that would identify the need for where this study would fit and could perhaps be considered in next year's plan?
That's our preference.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you.
Sorry, we do need to extend time for another 15 minutes first, please indicate. yeah. Okay.
10:30 it is.
I just have a question of the administration. Do we actually have a Dulwich master plan, or is this to develop a Dulwich master plan?
Yeah, through your worship, no, we don't have one at the moment. The proposal here is to develop one.
Gotcha.
Councillor Piggott.
It says feasibility study, but if I spend $40,000, if we spend $40,000, it's not my money, does that get us a master plan, or is it only a preliminary step? Yes is a good answer.
Through your worship, it depends on how big the study and the master plan goes into it. I think for $40,000 you'll probably just get a preliminary study into opportunities. So high-level concept.
And does it cover more than economics? Is it the way Councillor Henschke spoke of it was talked about, you know, traffic and all sorts of things. Is it broader than just the economics of the businesses in there?
Through your worship, yes. Short answer is yes, it would be. Thanks.
Apologies, I need to ask the same questions Sarah
Councillor Davis.
asked before, or Councillor Hughes asked before. Sorry, when were you looking at finishing your, just repeat the answer.
Yep, through your worship. So, strategic plan, April 2020. Economic development plan, July, August this year, 2019. And the planning reforms, we're in the hands of Dippy a little bit in terms of the actual time frames for consultation, but they're due to take effect from the 1st of July 2020.
Yes, Mr Deb.
Through the Mayor, one of the benefits of actually waiting to complete an economic development strategy is that that could start a conversation about differential rates for businesses, which would possibly enable the funding of master plans in the future for individual retail areas, and which then would then lead on to again, funding for future capital works, potentially, economic development strategies, marketing, communications, and that type of thing. So the economic development strategy could be the lever for a discussion about differential rates for business properties or commercial properties.
Don't have any more on my sign. Is that Councillor Dawes?
Yes, first time tonight. I've been very quiet and unusual. I just got to work out in my mind, why is Dulwich special here, Aaron? Why isn't there a Stonyfell master plan or something like that? I just need to understand. I didn't realise Dulwich was different from the other suburbs.
I'll take that one. This is an elected member bid, so this hasn't been identified by the administration. While we think it's worthwhile and appropriate potential, we're not necessarily saying that Dulwich gets the priority. What we would say is, following the development of these strategies, we'd then be able to prioritise villages or master plan development from there.
I still have to ask the question, why Dulwich?
Can I respond by just saying I think it's because the elected member is representing that area, and hence she has brought this project forward for us all to consider. If you wanted to do something similar for Stonyfell, it would have been up to you to have done that for Stonyfell.
For me to try and understand why I should support it, why isn't there a Rose Park rather than a Dulwich? I just want to hear from Councillor Henschke the reasons for that.
It's a highly utilised area in the ward, more so than the Rose Park area that you're referring to. And it is in the vicinity of the Glenside development. It has pressures from the major arterials. That is why. And at the businesses, the highest priority is safety. You know, I keep hearing about safety from the businesses. So if we can dovetail, perhaps is the word to describe it, this development and get the timing of it right with economic development and planning and so forth. But I wouldn't like to see this not looked at all, because it is safety. You know, safety is number one in this project, and I know that as soon as the administration engages with the businesses, safety will come up. And therefore, if we can perhaps have a baseline amount of money for this now, and then they could step it up as they see fit with timing to fit in with their plans for their strategies, economic development strategies, then that'll be fine. But if they can give us an indication, maybe it's some money to start, followed by it ramping up a bit more as soon as we're clear on the economic way forward. And then, of course, considering other priorities through the whole city of Burnside in that. But I would urge the elected members do not ignore the safety aspect, which we've touched on tonight about with another project.
I have no one on the screen. Oh, Councillor Davey.
I just had a quick idea, or perhaps Councillor Lemon, were you first? Would this include, just hearing what Councillor Henschke said, considering a 40 km/h zone through that area, like we proposed once in Beulah Park? Would that be a reasonable, feasible matter to consider in the feasibility study?
Through the Mayor, that could probably be part of the scope in terms of traffic calming, not dissimilar to the work undertaken through the McGill Village project.
Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I'm hearing two very distinct and very separate things here. One of them is economic development and the other is safety. And I actually see them as quite separate. So if we're looking at safety in terms of traffic flow, we've recently done work in that area, have we not? Before we put up the school crossing on the corner of Dulwich and Gurney. So we know how many cars go down that street. And we know how many cars go along Stewart Road, do we not? Just a nod. We know some of it, but possibly not all of it. Because I actually see that it's safety as an area. And in that sense, can I ask, what sort of control do we have over the traffic flow through that intersection? In a real sense, like in the long term. I mean, can we close off Dulwich Avenue? Can we close off Stewart Road to Greenhill Road? Because really, if you want to stop the traffic, that's what you're going to do.
I think the answer to that's unlikely.
Yeah.
You would just have to look at traffic calming measures holistically across the suburb, but I don't think closing roads will be an option.
Well, if we're looking at Dulwich Village, we're looking at a little set of strip shops around a roundabout, and what I'm hearing is a safety issue and separately an economic development issue. So these are separate things in my head. I just don't see how they can be brought together.
In the
Why
development
they are brought together, quite frankly.
The culmination of a master plan similar to a McGill Village will look at traffic movement as well as economic development
Sure.
and streetscape upgrades. So once you get to the full master plan component of a village concept, you will look at all of those different concepts. We would have to separate those issues as we go through the feasibility in the study to allow us to get there to the end.
Thank you.
So Henschke.
So thank you, Ma'am. So I'll quickly sum up. Yeah. Okay, we can't separate. We have to use a systems thinking approach to all our decision making, and safety, economic development. It's all one system. And I don't want to repeat, but we can ramp up and dovetail this project to match the outcomes of the economic development work of the administration. It is clearly a real hotspot. It's one of the villages in the city of Burnside that has a high intensity of economic activity. We don't want to spoil that with a death or an accident. It's just, we've been too lucky. Thank you.
All right, we move on to item 64, Tregenza Oval. Councillor Jones.
Thanks, Paul. I don't know whether you know, off Laurel Avenue in Linden Park, we have half an acre of open space owned by the council. It's currently being used by the Biodiversity Nursery, but the nursery is moving to Conningham Street, so the land will become vacant. So then the question is, what do we do with that land? It's community land. It's on the title of Tregenza Oval. So really, people, Barry's answer to the question this morning was there's a multitude of options of what we could do with that land. Personally, I think there's two main options. You can either sell it to a developer to build houses on, or we can keep it as open space. The council has tried on and off for 30 years to try and sell it to a developer. They've always been defeated by community pressure. I think it would be disaster to lose open space. And I also think, because it's community land, you would need the minister's permission to sell it. I suggest that would be a horrendous process to go through. It would be like the sale of the Chelsea cinema all over, except on steroids. So I think that's a really, really bad idea. So then we come to, we should keep it as open space. I think that's a really good idea. We don't have enough open space in Burnside. We certainly shouldn't be getting rid of it. So therefore, what do we do with our open space? And here, previous councils assist. We did some community consultation in May 2010, and people said they wanted a community garden. And so, on the 20th of July 2010, council passed motion S7241 to go ahead and build a community garden. On the 21st of September, the council decided to name it the Peter Bennett Organic Community Garden, in honour of Peter Bennett, who was a pioneer of organic gardening, who lived in the city of Burnside. So really I'm saying, why not just honour the Peter Bennett, honour the community consultation that's already taken place, don't waste any more money doing new community consultation. We know what the community would like, let's just go ahead and do it. The council administration hasn't proposed any money. I'm proposing $200,000, $175,000. There's money spare in the budget to do it. I think if we don't do it, it's just another year wasted. So let's just get on and do it. So that's what my recommendation is.
Councillor Davis.
You need to turn off. Sorry. No, I don't hear Councillor Davis.
I don't think you. I don't think you will. I think Councillor Jones, in particular, has been very strong on debt, and I can't support spending $200,000 with no other material, no report, no analysis, after a 3-minute speech of, well, let's just get it done, and there's money in the budget. So I think that the way this should be progressed is that a report be requested and it come back to council. I don't think that there's any way we could possibly spend $200,000 off the back of a couple of minutes of let's get it done speech. So I think that what a more appropriate way would be is to have a report, to consider it, consider the options, and then decide what we're going to do.
Councillor Hedgkey.
Thank you, Mayor. Question for the administration. Does the administration have an officer, an employee that can look or encourage sponsorship, not grants, but sponsorship for a community garden?
We don't have a specific designated grants officer whose job it is to look for potential funding for different projects. However, as part of any ongoing project or programme, the relevant department staff would be responsible for seeking alternative funding relevant to that particular programme or project. If council consider this use for this land, we would certainly look for opportunities for external funding of some sort.
We still have 3 people still to speak and the time is up again, so we need another 15 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question also, and that is, when is it likely that a report was going to come or will come to this council about this particular site? I know that there will be a report coming at some stage. I'd just like to have an indication of when that stage might be.
My intention is to bring it the mid-year, so July, August this year. We have to schedule a workshop with elected members first to discuss the background and all of the options, and then we're going to present a report afterwards.
And that report would have a number of options with all the associated costs for every option, including that of a community garden.
The initial report will probably discuss the high-level options available to council before we go too far down a rabbit hole with one particular option, and we'll seek direction from council about how far you want us to investigate a particular option, and then we'll go and do that work.
Thank you. I too will not be supporting this. I don't think that we should be spending this sort of money on a site for which we haven't made decisions. And it is a site. When we decided to implement the Conyngham Street Depot redevelopment, we knew that something would have to be decided about Laurel Avenue, but we also knew we had plenty of time to do that because we knew that it is community land. It is a bit of green space in an area where there isn't a lot of green space, and we were giving ourselves time to look at what might happen at that site. I don't think we should rush headlong into developing something that was decided 3 councils ago, 10 years ago. I mean, some of the people that might have actually been part of that community council are probably dead now. Seriously. I'm just not happy, and nobody actually has to implement what previous governments did. This is in actual fact, you're talking about the McPherson Council. Seriously? I'm not really happy about implementing whatever they may have wanted to do, that they never got around to doing, without us considering all the options ourselves, not at this sort of money, and not with a site that is that important in that area. So I just think that this is possible, but it's not come at the right time.
Councillor Hughes.
I just have a question that's perhaps of the administration. Would there be any issues, and perhaps it goes back to Councillor Jones as well, in making an allocation of funds but going to the community and asking how they want to use the land, but we would then have funds available in the budget to then spend in that following year? So we can still, I'm saying we can still get the report, find out what the community wants, because obviously the vibe of the room is we shouldn't be gung-ho making a decision on the fly tonight, and I obviously support the I do support retaining community land. I do think it's a great submission, but do we have to be specific in terms of what we're allowing for in the budget? Could it just be for general use once we go and get the report and make a decision as council? Yes, so I guess there is the point down the bottom around we could add it in at quarterly points. Are we better off though from a budgeting perspective to include an allowance now, knowing that as a council we think it's a good idea to do something with the site?
Through the Mayor, yes, that's certainly appropriate. The only issue is you don't know what the value is at this stage. $200,000 or 170 to 200,000 has been suggested as the figure for a community garden. It may not cover the entire scope of possibilities at that site, but as Karishma said, that could be topped up through quarterly budget reviews.
But you could start with the 175 and it could be less, it could be more. But we could say this is an allowance for something to go on that site once we make a decision. In a more generic sense for the redevelopment of that site.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was actually on the council from 2006 to 2010, where a lot of work was done on this site, and where there was a lot of debate and deliberation and community activism. And I'm not sure if Peter Bennett's name was mentioned, although I happen to know him and know of him and his fame, so it might have been since then that the name applied. But it has always been considered by the community as a very valuable piece of land and one that they would like to have a community garden on. So I support the bid in principle. I think it's an excellent bid. It's a fabulous piece of land in amongst a hugely overdeveloped, one could say, area. Will be becoming overdeveloped. It has some beautiful trees on it, and it has great potential for a little park and reserve and a community garden. So I would like to see some, and I recognise what my colleagues are saying in terms of we actually need a report from the administration to update what's feasible for the site and how we could go about achieving this objective. But I would still like to have both ways, actually, allocate some money, as Councillor Hughes has said, and then have a report from the administration about the options we could use to achieve what we think when we go out to the community they will reinforce that they want. So I support it.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was wondering how long it was going to take for Councillor Lemon to bring up the McPherson investigation. I had 6 months and I was about right. But I am very disappointed that it will somehow inference that council term, all decisions were somehow bad and so forth. So I'm very disappointed by that comment. But I did have a question though, without preempting the report that's going to come back later this year, just thinking about the site and thinking about the shortage of sporting facilities, i.e. netball courts, because I believe we don't have any netball courts in Burnside. Is this the sort of site that hypothetically could have something like netball courts on it?
It's a strange shape and size, and you would struggle with parking in that area as well. Hypothetically you could, but it's probably not best suited, and I'm assuming if you put that out to consultation, the residents probably wouldn't support it in that location. An assumption.
Just a follow-up question. With the consultation, how far will it go? Because naturally, the residents abutting the site are going to want the status quo. So how far is the consultation? What's the radius?
I would have to check the community engagement policy. Traditionally, it's minimum 250 metres from the border of any site, but depending on how far and wide council wish to go is what we would do. Yeah, for Conningham Street we did an entire suburb, but that was just direct letterbox drop. It still stayed wide in terms of distribution through Focus, Engage Burnside and advertising on the website.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you. Look, Councillor Jones and I have a very good idea about what, anecdotally at least, the people in Linden Park want, and that is not to continue urban infill. I think there's some good points made about the history of the site, that it was allocated to be a community garden. That never happened. I think there's some very reasonable concerns raised about, well, we don't know what we're doing, let's not give money to it. My perspective was very much, reflects what Councillor Hughes brought up, in that what I see this budget proposal as allowing for is earmarking funds that we have available in the budget for doing something to return this land to the community. Whether the report comes back and says, yes, community garden, or open park, or whatever it may be, we have funds in the budget allocated we can act on and move forward with. So that's how I view this. I support this bid, and I hope it is approved.
Councillor David.
I'm speaking twice, but I don't think it doesn't seem to me to be a good budgeting policy to put money aside per se to spend. You don't have no idea how much you're going to spend. You actually have no idea. Is it going to be 175? Is it going to be 300? Is it going to be 30? Are you going to have it just as grass with a few trees? Are you going to have a well-developed, a whole bunch of community plots? Could you turn it into netball courts? I don't think that allocating a random amount of money, and it is random because you actually have no idea what these options are going to cost, and putting it in. What would happen to this 175,000 is it would go into our surplus, and once we go and do that consultation and get the report, which will take months, then we will make the decision of how much to put in, and we just take it out of our surplus. It doesn't stop us taking money out of our surplus. So from a budgetary perspective, having the money locked away doesn't seem to be a better practice, considering you have no idea how much you're going to spend, like literally no idea how much you're going to spend there. It's just pie in the sky.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. 2 points I'd like to make. To allay anyone's fears about local residents or residents surrounding the park having ownership, there's a very good template for this in the Constable Hard Memorial Gardens. We had exactly the same situation, in one fighting to save the gardens and bring them into Burnside control, and then 2 to develop them with the current lovely landscaping and kindergarten. And the administration have got a great formula about how to do that in terms of consultation and how wide to take it to get a good result. The other thing is we've also got an excellent template for a community garden in what we have in McGill, which was developed, evolved, and Chapel Street, I think it is, in the last council. And that's a superb community garden with community ownership by people who live around it. And I think that's an excellent idea about what could be used to help in Laurel Avenue. So there's lots of hope there and lots of scope. We just need to get on and get that report, I guess, to us. But I think we also need to allocate some funds as well.
We've got 4 minutes left before we need to go extend the time, and I've got 5 people on the list. Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. I still feel very uncomfortable about allocating money to something that we haven't decided yet. I mean, I understand the local councillors are saying that people don't want urban infill. I don't believe allocating money from a budget tonight is actually going to allay those fears, because that's just an allocation of money. What we need to do is make a decision about the site, and that will allay people's fears. Allocating money is Band-Aid stuff, and I really want to look at this properly so that we actually do it properly. It doesn't have to be a community garden in that site. We've actually talked in previous councils of having urban forests. Why can't we look at urban forests? Why can't we look at that sort of thing? I really don't like the idea of having our hands tied tonight when we don't even know what the potential for that site is. I don't even know how big it is. I don't know what we're looking at in terms of the size of the place, its square meterage. And I don't know what the potential is. And if you really want a community garden, I mean, here we are, let's talk out of the square here. You've got Linden Avenue in Linden Park, which is a massive verge running down the middle of a double street. Why can't you put community gardens on that? You could have, well, there's a big, long street in Linden Park, and I thought it was called Linden Avenue, Hazelwood Park. Well, that is in the same area, more or less, on the other side of Portrush Road, where it is. You can have community gardens on the verge, and that people could go there and do their stuff. I mean, I just think that, I mean, I understand that community gardens are great, and I understand that community gardens really keep communities together. I don't know that this is the best site for it. It's tucked out of the way. It's quite tight to get to. There's not a lot of parking around it. I really feel much more comfortable making a decision about this first, and then allocating a budget, and then actually being firm about what we're going to do with this site and allaying the fears of the neighbours of this site. That's to me the right way of doing it.
I'm just going to ask for guidance here. I have 3 people who still wish to ask questions or make a comment, and I either allow those 3 to speak and we go for another 15 minutes, or the will of the group, we move back to the beginning and start voting on these forms.
Okay, what about, through the chair? Pardon?
Look, just let's, up to 10 minutes.
Right.
Quick and short.
Thank you, Mayor. It's it's an exciting opportunity. I've supported in principle. I can just imagine there'd be so many people that could be involved in something like this, but I do agree that we need to have a tighten up. So I'm thinking, can the administration take an approach of putting expressions of interest out for something like this and just get something going? Because if we're going to be going down the path of more reports and community consultation, that's going to cost $40,000 anyway.
To start that process, we'll need council direction. We won't start that process until we've presented the report to council or council has resolved to direct us in a particular way.
Councillor Hughes.
I just have a question. What was the cost of the McGill Community Garden, indicatively?
It was in this vicinity. It's about 180 grand.
Ballpark.
I can't recall that I'm being involved.
I reckon it'd be 5 or 6 years ago. It was about 180
Yeah.
grand.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Piggott, you removed your name before, so I'm going to give you the opportunity and then leave it to Councillor Jones to finish.
Great. A question. When Conningham's up and running and the nursery operations are from Conningham, what is the timing that Laurel Avenue will become no longer a nursery? I mean, I suppose that's definite, is first question. Is that definite? And second, when will that happen?
The Conningham Street project's expected to be completed any time between October and December, within that window. You would start using the new site probably from January onwards. Council hasn't made a decision on whether or not the current nursery site is no longer a nursery. That might still be an additional nursery at that site if that's what council chooses to do. What we've always said was we've designed Conningham to be able to manage the city's needs in terms from a nursery service.
Yeah. Okay. Well, perhaps if I can give Councillor Jones something more to respond to. I feel this is. Look, the debate about Laurel Avenue is pretty straightforward. As I see it, it belongs to all the residents of the city of Burnside, not just the people in Linden Park, and we all face that here. It is land owned by the city of Burnside, so the decision needs to be made by all of us, and probably the two decisions would be to develop it or keep it as open space, and the issues around developing it are alive and well that Councillor Jones pointed out about the process to make it not community land in order to do that. So that's not uncomplicated. So, but that is the debate that ultimately may need to be had. What this is, though, I feel is a tactic, a strategy to get a community garden on there ahead of us actually having all the information. And that's for that reason I feel it's not appropriate to go into the budget. It's just not fair, I don't think, to all the people in the city of Burnside for us to sign off on certainly a specific use of it. A general $175,000 also I feel is not really appropriate either, because we'll have half an acre of open space that we will want to do something reasonably decent with if that's the way it goes, and 175 won't scratch the surface. So I don't think it is appropriate right now to do it. Thanks.
Councillor Jones.
I'd just like to say, I think we've had the reports. Obviously, I'm keen to go ahead. I don't think $175,000 is pie in the sky. It is based on previous estimates of what it would cost. However, I do think Councillor Hughes has put forward a reasonable compromise, which obviously some people in the chamber think is a good idea, and I'd be happy to proceed that way. In terms of sponsorship, people will be pleased to know that community has engaged our local MP, Vicky Chapman, and she is very enthusiastic about the prospect about keeping it as open space, and I suspect we could tap her for some money. and obviously we have a Commonwealth federal election in, I would guess, about 6 weeks' time, and the community is going to start engaging with the relevant candidates to see if they will also commit to putting their hands in their pockets. So I think we should strike while the iron is hot and put some money aside. And if we don't use it on reflection, it's not the end of the world. But if we do decide to go ahead, we've got the money in the bank, we can go ahead and get on with it. So I commend the proposal to you.
Councillor Davis.
I'd like to move a motion.
Well, I'd like to move back to
Yeah.
through them all, right? I thought you wanted to speak again.
No.
Right. We had 4 minutes left. Right, so now can we please go back and move all of these in a formal manner? That begins with Councillor Hughes.
No, I'd like to move a
and you need to read the first. Sorry.
I'd like to move a motion. I'd like to move that items 59, 60 and 63, but to a value of 15,000 be included in the budget.
That the report be received as well.
Yeah.
So it's, which ones?
Those
You
are
have to
here
say
on that.
those again, please, Councillor.
59, 60 and 63, but 63 with a value of 15,000.
So Green Hill Road pedestrian, cycling routes and verge upgrade.
Yeah.
So the first three on there.
That's the verge one. Yeah.
He can do it that way.
Yeah. Not Dulwich. 59, 60 and 63. No,
Just to make it clear, it was suggested by our CEO that it was done in a different way, but Councillor Davis has the right to do it in this way if he wishes.
Yeah. I think otherwise we'll be here all night if we go through each one and then spend 5 minutes debating it. So in my view, look, I'll run through it quickly, and I think we have discussed some of the things. I talk about some of the things. I will talk about why I haven't included, and I do think that that's relevant. I know the Mayor has called up people who said if you were talking about why something wasn't in there, wasn't relevant, but I will. Item 61, I think that it should come after those reports, and I think that we should look at doing that following those reports being completed, and then we'd be in a better position to assess whether we should spend the further funds. And I think it's a good idea to conduct the master plan feasibility study as suggested by Councillor Henschke, but I think that those reports should come first. In relation to item 64, let's have that debate. Let's have that debate. Let's get the report back. Let's do it properly. It will take the exact same amount of time. There is no point in allocating money into the budget when you have no idea what you're going to do there. At the end of the day, if we decide by this council to put it into the budget, we can do it. And I'd suggest that if you calculate through the time frames, I bet you it will probably cross over from this budget into the next one, even if we agree to do it within this in the next financial year. But I do think that we should commence that process, and I'd encourage the ward councillors to ask for a report, and I would definitely support that. But I see no benefit in putting 175,000 into the budget at this stage. However, I think that it is something that we should be exploring. I think that the crossing on Green Hill Road, for me, is quite clear, and I support that expenditure of 125,000. And I think Councillor Hubel's the expenditure on the cycling network is also quite clear. I think that we've had a significant number of, I've had a number of residents come to me asking that the council do more, and I think that's an excellent proposal, and the $10,000 will be well spent. In terms of number 63, I'm a little bit more cautious. However, I think that if it was 15,000 rather than 20, and perhaps not installing the irrigation, but if we can look at improving that area, it is a very high traffic area. It is a prominent place, and I think that it will add to the beautification of our city. And that's why I move that items 59, 60 and 63 be put into the budget. I'd like to say that there are some great budget bids, some very good budget bids, and I'd probably support exploring all of them. However, in terms of what document we actually put out and we put together, I think that if we limit it to this, that would be the best way forward. And then we can have a proper debate about, I think the most controversial one, I think the one most likely to be defeated or, called into question on the Tregenza Oval, the community garden. I think that why don't we ask for that report? Let's see what it says. And if we want to spend it this year, we can do that. There's no problem in it. But I don't think that we should, I think it's very bad to commit ourselves to putting money into a budget, which is this organisation's financial planning, to make a decision and to make it to that amount. And I think that that's irresponsible. And if we change our mind during this year, it doesn't rule it off. And we can certainly bring it back. And that's why I think we should move 59, 60 and 63. And I seek your support for those tonight.
Do we have a seconder? I apologise. Were you wanting to second
I wanted to ask a question.
Oh, you can after the seconding.
Right, okay. A procedural question, sorry.
Can I?
Oh, sorry.
It's getting late. I think Councillor Davis has articulated very well what we can do tonight, and I'm happy to progress those proposals along those lines. I am, as I said earlier, very keen to pursue the Tregenza Gardens community garden, because I think that's very viable, or a very good proposition, but I take on board all the comments that have been made in terms of that is jumping the gun in terms of deciding the use of the site, and that we have a step to go before that. So while I remain very committed to that, and I'm committed to work towards achieving that, I think there's another step to go before we can do that. So hopefully you'll support this motion tonight.
Now, Councillor Jones, you can ask your question.
This is a procedural question. If I want to put 64 up for a vote, can I do it after we vote on this, or do I have to vote this one down?
I believe that this would have to be voted down and then a new motion.
So I can't do it. I can't vote for this because I like all three of these projects.
You can vote against it. You can vote against this and then put up another motion if it is lost.
But I can't vote for this and then put up 64 for a vote.
No, you can't.
You can amend this.
But an amendment.
You need to move an amendment.
So you could move an amendment.
But an amendment cannot substantially change the motion. So it would be an ultra vires amendment.
Through the Mayor, it wouldn't. So you could move an amendment in relation to this motion, because it changes it, but it doesn't take away what Councillor Davis has moved.
Okay. You can't remove any, but you can add.
So you can add, or alternatively, if this motion is passed by the council, you can move a subsequent motion that your project be included, and that would be voted on independently.
I can add a subsequent motion. Okay. I think it would be much more sensible if we just voted on each 5 individually, as CEO suggested, but personally...
Yeah, well, we can just vote this down and do it away.
You could do that, but that would mean you'd have to vote this down and start back again at the beginning.
But if we all agreed, no debating, we'll just have a vote on each one?
Yes, I agree.
We can't agree that.
No, there's a motion already on the table. We have to vote on this motion.
Yeah, I think we can vote it down there and do what you say.
Okay, this is...
Is there any further discussion? I've got Councillor Hughes.
I had a question. So in terms of just progressing Councillor Jones's proposal, a report will come to council around in June or whenever it was, around the options for the site, and then we can allocate, just to clarify, we can allocate funds after that, and that may be 50 grand for a concept design of whatever it is before we move forward. So we can do that at any point during the year.
That's what I understand.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davis, you wish to sum up?
Actually.
Oh, Councillor Henschke, sorry, you have a question.
My comment is I'm concerned about the priorities here. We're spending $15,000 on a verge and we're not spending 1 cent on Dulwich and the safety issues that have been raised in the community zone.
Right, Councillor Davis.
Yeah, we'll sum up now. I don't think you should look at it like that. As I said, I think that the Dulwich motion and looking at that particular project it definitely has merit. In my view, the reason why I didn't include it here is because I think we should wait for that report first and then do things in the proper order. I can understand some councillors' frustration in that we're not kicking goals, that we're not moving things along tonight, that we're not, achieving everything we want to in one night. Unfortunately, in my view, that's how government does move slowly, and I do think that we have to do things in the proper order. And so I'd like to see the report before we look at Dulwich, and I'd like to see another report before we look at the Linden Park option, looking at a community garden or some other, what else we do there. So I think this is in my view, these are the three easy ones to move through tonight, and I think that they are a good way to spend our money and our ratepayers' money. And then the other things which I think have merit, we can look at in due course.
Right, those in favour? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those. 4. My suggestion is that Councillor Jones and Councillor Henschke, if you would like to move a motion that calls for a report, yours in July, yours you can choose the month, that you can call for a report that follows on straight after this, so that we don't forget either of those projects as potential future projects. So, Councillor Jones, do you wish to speak first?
Might want to help me with the wording. The administration provide a report to council in July. What's this? You can't even see the strings. In July. Yeah, good idea, Paul. Does it have to be on the project or just on the use of the Laurel Avenue land? Yeah.
Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah.
Why don't you put Dulwich in there as well?
Yeah, put them both into one motion. Putting yours in the same motion.
Yeah. You can move a motion that will include 64. Right, okay. But I can also... Right. Right, okay. I think you should. Yeah, right. Move for 64. I'm on the list to second. Okay. I think that's covered. So, scrap that. Scrap that, make it motion to accept 64. Yeah, okay. So, yeah. Right.
Yes, you can do that.
So, I can, right, so I'll move that we accept 64. Can I vary it to for funds available, allocate funds to develop the open space for community use. Or do I have to?
I think the motion's got to stay like as it is.
Okay. All right, I'll submit it as it is.
Submit it as it is,
Yep.
and then see how the
Yep.
working members vote on that.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
So you want to include that, the motion is to include item 64, is it?
In the draft.
Yes.
Yes, it is. Item 64 as part of the budget bid for
Yes.
2019-20.
Yes.
That's what.
Correct?
Okay. Yep.
And you're moving that?
I'll move that.
And you will seconding it? Yeah, it's allowed to be added to it. It is up to you to decide whether you want to.
Sorry, what's the motion? I thought that was the motion.
No, you didn't realise that you could actually move the motion to add on to yours first. My fault, sorry.
Right.
Okay. So you can still move to add to this report.
So,
If it fails,
Yep.
we'll go back to this.
yeah, okay, all right.
So at this moment, the motion
And then-
is to include
Yes.
item 64.
Yes.
He's allowed to add an additional one. No, he's allowed to, I've asked for advice on this. He is allowed to add this, it can be moved. Yes, it's a second motion, but he can include that. And it's up to you to vote it down. Or support it. Yeah, that's what I understood. Yeah, Paul, could you explain, we're having objections to this additional motion going forward? Could you give us the process, please?
Through the Mayor, the resolution that Council has just adopted to include the 3 projects didn't specifically exclude the other projects. So there's nothing to prevent the other projects being...
What happened to the request for the report?
That's back up.
I suggest you use it quickly.
So can I just ask, that would normally be done in an amendment. That's what amendments are for. The Mayor did say that yes, an amendment would be suitable because it was adding in, it hadn't been excluded. Would it be, I know it's not normal, but you're saying it is okay to, just while the list is small, because if it was a long list, we'd all be doing it.
Well, the other option was to, of course, go through one thing at a
Well, the
time.
amendment, I feel the appropriate way was an amendment.
People will have the right to use their voice in their voting. So we have already Councillor Hughes.
I'm flashing.
Sorry.
Hughes, not Hughes.
Are you going to talk?
Do you wish to speak to it? No, I think enough's been said. All right, okay.
So this doesn't do Dulwich either, is that what you're saying?
No, we'll go through that at this point in time. This is when it's come forward. If it wishes to be added, then they certainly have the right to, because it wasn't excluded. Right, Councillor, those in favour of adding...
Well, we talked to the motion, there's debate.
Oh, yeah, sorry, they don't wish to speak, but you can.
Yeah, I'll speak. I have a question. Do you want to speak to this motion? I have a question. Has work been done in relation to or some work been done into the possible options for Laurel Street Avenue?
Not a significant amount of work. Early discussions about how the report will be presented, but not a huge amount of work at this stage.
Are there other... So were there reports done about community consultation prior to, like on this site and what it could be used for?
This council and the previous council haven't. I would have to look into
But
the
there's a
history
report
and the
back in
background.
2010?
I'd have to look at the history
Okay.
at that stage.
I indicate that I'm unwilling to vote on the motion until the documents set out in terms of previous consultation on this motion are tabled.
Councillor Hughes?
No, that's not how it works.
Sorry, I didn't look at me.
They're very special words.
Yes, I know what you're saying.
Through the Mayor, we are unable to provide that information right now, and we can provide it in due course. So that being the case, no further action can occur on this matter until we submitted that information.
What about the second motion about? So you can move on now to use the motion. Sorry, you can move now on to use the motion that you had previously set up, that both you and Councillor Henschke had asked for a report. So that can go ahead. All right. So you wish to move that now and second it, Councillor Henschke? All right. Any debate?
We're back to that.
Councillor Davies.
Very happy with that. Oh, I'm happy to support this motion. I think that's very sensible, and that's in what, 2 months' time?
3 June, July, May.
Okay. No, I'm happy to support this motion.
I'll speak. No, I will say something. I don't understand the bullishness. In my view, this is incredibly bullish to try and force an amount of money into the budget, and I don't feel that this council has the information available to it to make a proper question, and therefore I'll support this motion.
This is
but
not
I wouldn't
about
support
money.
the
It's
last.
not about money. It's asking for a report.
Yeah. This is the appropriate way to do it, to ask for the information and then go about it, rather than trying to force huge amounts of money into a budget sight unseen after a 3-minute speech.
Right. Those who are in favour, do you wish to speak again, Councillor Councillor Jones? All right, those in favour of this motion, please raise your hands. Those against? No, it was a unanimous. Now we need to move. We need to do at least 2 more this evening. 13.5 I'm going to move to next, which is the Garrock, because there is a deadline on a response and reply to that. So that's page it's page 97. We have 10 minutes, 8, 9 minutes. My suggestion is that we actually do an extension of time now and for an extra half hour. Until 11 o'clock, I should say. So move, Councillor Piggott, seconded, Councillor Hubel. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. No?
Yep, that the report be received. Do I have to read it all out? No? Okay. We're going to cast a vote unless anyone wanted to put forward a proposed recommendation to council.
Can I just give you some guidance on this one? Yep. What we need to do is, we are nominating, of course, Councillor Piggott.
Yes.
We do need to nominate somebody else. Now, my suggestion, I'm not telling you for consideration, is that if you look at the membership of the current Garrock, all of the east and the north are covered with representatives. The south and the west are not. So in terms of looking at an alternative of an additional person to be nominated, my suggestion is you consider representatives from the south and the west, because this is supposed to be about the Greater Adelaide region, and at the moment it is dominated by the east and the north.
Okay,
at the moment, the people who are on it are Gawler, Salisbury, Tea Tree Gully, Nord, Payneham, St Peters, Prospect and Adelaide Hills.
I'd like to propose that we put in Angela Evans from Charles Sturt as our second nomination. Thank you.
All right, seconded. That's Councillor Lemon. Any debate? All right, I'll put the motion. And that means in number 4, Councillor Piggott and Mayor Evans goes into that space. Right, hands up again, please. Right, unanimous, carried, unanimous. And then the other one is the LGA. No, it's not. No, it's not. It is the LGA nomination, page 141. I am unable to attend the ordinary general meeting on 12th of April, So I am looking for someone to represent me in that. Councillor Lemon, are you nominating?
No, I'm not, but I'd like to nominate Peter Cornish, who has actually agreed to do this, should he get up.
Okay.
So I'd like to nominate Peter Cornish to go to this meeting on your behalf.
All right. Nominated by Councillor Lemon, seconded by Councillor Davey. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on that this matter? Right, those in favour? Those against? All right. Right, thank you. Now, we have a large number. We are getting further and further and further behind every single meeting. We are going to have to adjourn this meeting and restart it on the 9th of April at 6 p.m. in order to do any kind of catch-up. We are now 2 meetings behind in terms of some of the reports that we have to consider. Fortunately, the ones we have that are urgent have been considered. That's not belittling any of those that remain, but we will have to, since you voted not to continue time, then we will adjourn on the 9th of April at 6 p.m, but we need a motion for that. Councillor Piggott, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Davis. Those are in favour? So that's the 6 o'clock meeting. That will be 6 o'clock on the 9th of April. We will have to finish the remainder of last meeting and this meeting before we then have the 7 o'clock meeting. All right. Those in favour? Against? We did. All right, carried. All right, so I will now close the meeting at 10:25.